Okay, so good morning or good afternoon or good evening wherever you are. A lot has happened in the last week. Obviously, a lot has happened since I did my last video, which was the match review of the Barrow Ipswich Town FA Cup replay. Some big talking points: the end of the F1 season, um, at the Aston Marina race, with how the FIA and the race director handled the safety car, and that whole race in general. The situation there, the situation with the UEFA Champions League draw and having to be redrawn at the beginning of the week, there was controversy with the draw process. There's also been a lot of issues to do with COVID shutdowns in various leagues around the world. Now, the FIA, obviously Mercedes, I don't think it's on the drivers. I think if Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen, whoever won that race, whoever won the championship, it's not on the drivers. They were following the instructions they were given by the race director, which came from the FIA. The initial protests were thrown out by the FIA. The Mercedes team have gone higher. It'll be interesting to see what happens if they do go to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. However, I don't think they're going to be able to overturn the final race result and or the World Championship result. However, it does raise questions about the integrity of F1. Not that it's a form of motorsport that I enjoy watching personally myself anymore. However, we have seen controversy in motorsport before when it comes down. The FIA didn't want it to finish behind a safety car, that is clear. So there's a lot of question marks over the way the rules are currently worded, the race direction, the race control. It's not on the drivers, however. I think every single team involved in the race can have cause for complaint about how the safety car was handled because of the way the constructors work out, final race positions, etc., etc. Anything can happen on a final lap sprint. Both drivers could have tagged each other, taken each other off. Someone else could have won the race. So there's a whole range of complaints that can be raised with the handling of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Um, in football news and in NHL news, there are several teams that are currently going through COVID shutdowns. The NHL is postponing a lot of games right now. Um, through a handful of teams, I think 5 teams in the NHL are currently in protocols and having extended shutdowns through the Christmas period. In English football, Manchester United, Tottenham, and Reading are the clubs that are currently in COVID protocols and are currently shut down, which is affecting the Championship and the Premier League, and may also have impacts going into European and FA Cup football. So it'd be interesting to see how the Football League and the FA and the Premier League deal with those shutdowns and how those games get rearranged, considering that this time next year, obviously, we are playing in the World Cup in Qatar. So there's going to be a very congested schedule. It will be interesting come the new year when the third round of the FA Cup comes along, which all 3 clubs are involved in, how that impacts the Cup games, how it also impacts the European club games as well, and regular league fixtures. So it'll be very, very interesting to see how the FA, the Football League, and the Premier League deal with that. At the moment, no further teams are currently in protocols or have shutdowns. That will yet to be seen. We've seen record numbers of positive test results, higher than the peak last season. So that makes for very interesting viewing and to see how they deal with that. On the NHL side of things, they have to make a decision about the Olympics. The longer they leave it, the more precarious it becomes. And with more teams having players in protocols, it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward. Um, if they are to withdraw from the Olympics, they've got until I think January the 10th to make a decision. Um, the league is saying it's now on the NHLPA for that decision to be made. They're running out of time. They've only got 3 weeks to come to a decision whether they're going or not. It'll be very interesting to see what the numbers are for the players in COVID protocols over the Christmas period. Um, they've strengthened the COVID protocols to where they were last season in an attempt to reduce the rate of infection with teams. They don't want to have another Vancouver Canucks Calgary Flames situation where they're playing a lot of games in a very condensed schedule at the end of the season when they don't really matter. They want to avoid that as if at all possible. They want to avoid expanding the playoffs again and having a reduced season. They want to have every game played. Um, so it's a very interesting time with what happens with the NHL. England and the Ashes, the first test disaster. This could be a very long Ashes series. some question marks over team selection, some question marks over the tactics employed by Joe Root and his team. And of course, this comes with the backdrop of all the scandal the cricket's had over the last couple of months, both sides, England and Australia, off the field, to do with misconduct allegations, to do with racism, bullying, sexism, that kind of thing. So this Ashes series is coming on the backdrop of a lot of scandal and a lot of negative headlines. Is that having an impact on both sides? We'll wait to see what happens with the second test. If it's a whitewash again, there are serious question marks over Joe Root as captain, the coaching setup, the selectors setup, which I think are valid questions that need to be had anyway. So we'll wait and see how that all plays out. What else can we talk about? There's quite a few things going on. The Major League Baseball lockout is still continuing. I can't see any movement with the lockout. It's an interesting one because other sports could pick up angry, disgruntled fans due to the Major League Baseball lockout. So that is a watch this space kind of situation right now, and how that damages the brand of Major League Baseball with further labour unrest. So what we've got here, right? So as of a couple of days ago, so there's been no further movement between the league and the players' union. The Major League Baseball is not even trying to end the lockout. This is what this article is saying. This is on Sports Illustrated. So, go away. Major League Baseball is not even trying to end the lockout. So this is an article written by Stephanie Abstein for the Sports Illustrated. So this is a couple of days ago, on December the 16th, which is 3 days ago. Entering Thursday, the league and the union had not met since the CBA expired on December the 1st at midnight, so there would be no further meetings for 2 weeks. Some 10 hours after Major League Baseball locked out its players, Commissioner Rob Manfred told reporters that a work stoppage is bad for business. Let me finish by reiterating our willingness to bargain at any time. Evidently, he's changed his mind. According to two people familiar with the process, entering Thursday, the league, so this Thursday this week, the league and the union have not met since the CBA expired at 1 minute to midnight on December the 1st. 1 minute past midnight on December the 2nd, the league imposed a lockout, baseball's first work stoppage in 26 years. A handful of people are scheduled to talk Thursday, so there are going to be some talks happening, were meant to be happening about issues other than the core economic ones. A broad category that could include such topics as a joint drug agreement. Yes, there is definitely a lot of doping still, and recreational drug use within Major League Baseball. The conversation is inconsequential enough that league negotiators Dan Halem of Major League Baseball and Bruce Mayer of the Players Association are not expected to attend. So key people are not attending that meeting. The union officials declined to comment. Major League Baseball officials said it was the league that suggested the Thursday session. The league believes the union did not treat December the 1st as a real deadline. The union believes the league spent more time enumerating topics on which it would not negotiate instead of actually negotiating. Both claims probably have merit, neither really matters. Now, this is important. Major League Baseball is not yet in a position of losing games, but it is already losing attention. Max Verstappen obviously won a controversial F1 title last weekend. Steph Curry broke the career three-point record on Tuesday, which he did in the NBA. The NFL playoffs begin in a month. Between Thanksgiving and December 1st, teams committed nearly $1.5 billion in free agency. They could be using this month to introduce those players to their new teams. Instead, the Red Sox Twitter account spent Wednesday photoshopping a photo of Pedro Martinez chewing bubblegum. This is an outrageous way to treat the paying customers who keep professional sports afloat, which we do. And they're not even trying. No one involved believes there will be a serious conversation before January. People familiar with the process suggest that convening the two sides in a room would just produce a repeat of the obstinate days leading up to the CBA's negotiation. What would be the point of having everyone retake positions they already took? It is true that they would be tedious, so here's an idea: negotiate. The owners' proposals to this point have been largely unserious. The union was never going to agree to make players free agents at 29 and a half years old, right after their physical peak, nor was it likely to look fondly at a system that would allocate bonus money to young players by taking money from their pensions. The players tend to ask for the moon and then look aggrieved when they don't get it. The truth is that they bargained away most of the leverage in the past two CBA negotiations, and they do not have much left to offer, but the owners are miscalculating their position here. Got a cup of tea. Both sides deserve some blame for intransigence, but only one side initiated a lockout. The owners did so to prevent the players from striking. That worked. There have been other consequences. The league's website, television channel, and social media accounts scrubbed of players' names and images present a constant reminder of how little the sport has to offer without its labour. The union might not have had the votes to organise and maintain a strike. A lockout offers for solidarity. It also serves as a reminder to fans that these people do not really care about them. In that December 2nd press conference, Manfred said, "We imposed a lockout our desire to drive the process forward to an agreement now." Then it seems he turned off his phone. So basically, the media is very scathing of how the league and the players' union have handled themselves over the last couple of weeks. Um, what else is happening? Yeah, there's nothing really happening. There seems to be no movement at all. So the Dodgers on their web feed, Dodgers Nation, which is a fan group, Major League Baseball lockout update, everything you need to know about when it will end and how it impacts Los Angeles. As we approach the third full week of the MLB lockout, things are feeling bleak for baseball fans. According to Evan Drellich of The Athletic, the league and players' union have no plans on discussing a new CBA agreement again this year. So there's going to be no further talks this year. So nothing else to really report, or at least the core economics of a new deal, which is the origin of the whole of as it is. That's important. With the important talks tabled mid-January, is now a best-case scenario for the off-season to restart. For the Dodgers, the sooner the off-season and the play movement resumes, the better. So far, since the season ended, LA has lost Corey Seager, Max Scherzer, and a load of other players that I don't really care about. Moreover, there's a massive void in the starting rotation. That's all to do with the Dodgers. At this moment, there's still time for the two sides to come together and find something that won't affect the start of next season. But with each passing day, that window closes a bit more. So that's basically the Dodgers fan base take on the baseball standoff. What we're seeing with Major League Baseball is there's going to be no further talks this year. Neither side's willing to talk, so that's basically a really bad PR for both sides. Fans are rightly annoyed, and other sports can quite easily go, "You're an angry fan base, come watch our sport." So it is interesting how baseball's dealing with things. Um, the only major league in North America without salary cap, that has to change. The only proposal I've seen put forward by either side is expanding the playoffs. That is the only proposal that has any merit that's been put forward that is discussion worthy. But other than that, neither side would want to go to the discussion table and discuss things and negotiate. There is no good faith in these negotiations. They're negotiating in bad faith. So I can't see how Major League Baseball does restart in time for the 2022 preseason. Now, I do have viewers on this channel and subscribers who are Major League Baseball fans. Now, I'm not a Major League Baseball fan. I'm not a fan of baseball, really. I will watch the occasional game in passing, casual viewing, but I don't really follow the sport. I don't know any players, really. For me, it has its merits as a sport. Every sport does. But it also has massive flaws within the sport. The fact that the ownership of the teams in the month before the lockout spent $1.5 billion in free agency is ridiculous to then the next day go, now we're going to lock you out. What is going on with Major League Baseball? For whatever reason, the situation has been allowed to fester for 26 years since the last Labour stoppage. Issues that could have been resolved in the last 25 or so years haven't been. They've been allowed to grow, fester, and therefore Major League Baseball has reached the point now where it is, quite frankly. The whole situation was easily avoidable from the beginning, but neither side wanted to enter in the negotiations in good faith. And I've done a history video on the breakdown of the Labour unrest 2 weeks before the lockout, not expecting one day to work. Oh, this has happened. It hit me a little bit by surprise. But the fact that they weren't willing to renegotiate and extend the CBA at any point in the last 2 years, knowing that December the 2nd was going to expire, shows just really poor foresight. There were issues last year in the return to play negotiations about the length of the schedule, the amount of games in the schedule, how many games would be played, how much salary would be deferred. So there were already issues last year that were warning signs that this year was going to happen. They came very, very close to a player strike last year or a lockout last year. How they avoided it is beyond me. How they got any play played is beyond me. So, and all this does is damage the reputation of the sport. And the issue that baseball has, it's got an older fan base and a shrinking fan base in comparison to the other sports in North America. It was the last sport to take major league regular season or preseason games to Europe, which is another big sports market. Um, and the London series didn't go down as well as I think Major League Baseball was hoping it was going to. It got very mixed responses from fans. Very mixed responses, even from casual fans for the experience. Very mixed feedback. So that in itself is an interesting subplot. Um, the other major league sports aren't in perfect situations themselves. Let's make that very very clear. Major League Soccer is gaining ground on the Big Four, and they play at the same time of year that Major League Baseball does. So if this lockout continues for a long period of time, Major League Soccer could expand its fan base and its revenue streams because there are going to be disgruntled sports fans in a lot of US markets and Canadian markets, because Toronto, that will quite happily, no doubt in my mind, watch Major League Soccer while it's playing. Switch their viewership away from Major League Baseball if this carries on to another league. And Major League Soccer can make a massive killing in revenue. Major League Rugby is expanding as well in similar locations, in catchment areas that Major League Baseball has. I know it's a different sport, but again, if you're picking up casual fans who are disgruntled, some of the hardcore fans may stick it out. But if you are more of a casual fan who goes to a couple of games here or there, watches a few games on the TV, you're going to want to have your sports fix. You're going to look at those sports that are competing in the sports markets at the time, the smaller growing sports in rugby and in soccer, as you would call it in the US, or football as we call it over here in Europe. If they've got their business model tuned up and they've got their heads tuned in, they're going to be trying to attract those disgruntled Major League Baseball fans to their product. And labour unrest with Major League Baseball is damaging the sport. Let's be clear on that. There is no debate on that whatsoever. The situation that the league finds itself in is of its own making, and the players aren't helping themselves either. The players and the owners aren't helping themselves. The PR nightmare this has become, and other major sports stories have broken globally, not just in the US, but going on. You know, the Champions League draw that ended in farce and had to be redrawn over last weekend, following on from the F1 controversy. Major sports stories are breaking constantly. Fans are like, we're not interested in this anymore. We're going to go. A lot of Major League Baseball fans may switch to watch the NFL, the NHL, the NBA, because we're reaching key points in the seasons there. The playoffs in the NFL are going to start soon. There is a whole host of things going on. Uh, so Major League Baseball, they need to be very, very careful with how they handle this situation. Um, let's have a look. So they have to be very, very mindful. The longer this goes on, the more damage gets done. They could be in a position like the NHL where they lose a whole season. And then what happens after that? Because from what I'm reading and seeing, there seems to be no reason neither side is pushing for negotiation of any kind. There seems to be no drive to find a compromise in any way, shape, or form at all, which is, in my view, um, helping them not at all. On the side of what's happening with English football, with three teams currently shut down because of COVID outbreaks, I think the most serious is Tottenham. They've missed the most games. Man United and Reading are quite serious as well. They had implications for both the Championship and the Premier League and the associated cup competitions that the sides are involved in. and fixture congestion is going to be a problem. They could have massive impacts on how leagues look at the end of the season. If they can't get these games refixtured, they automatically forfeit a 2-0 defeat, and that could have massive implications on the Championship relegation battle with Reading and the European places with Man United and Tottenham in the Premier League. I do think, though, because of the size of the leagues and the amount of revenue the leagues make, they will fix these games somehow, but it will be very interesting to see when those games get fixtured and how they fit them into the schedule, bearing in mind how congested the schedule is going to be with a shortened off season this summer and with the pending transfer window as well in January. In literally just over a week's time, the transfer window opens. It's going to be very, very interesting. They're going to have to somehow squeeze these games in at very short notice. Other teams will also be impacted by having their schedules messed up, basically, and fans are going to be the ones who suffer as a result because they've already scheduled in when they're going to buy their tickets for what games. They've now got to get refunds, most likely. And also, we're seeing the COVID passes brought in for big sporting events in Wales, England, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. It'd be interesting to see how attendances are impacted with the COVID regulations being strengthened again this year. But I'll be interested to see. Good morning. Obviously, the last few days in America and Canada, we've seen capacities reduced in the Canadian cities to 50%. We have seen several teams shut down going into the Christmas break because of COVID situation. And now we're seeing the same thing over here with teams getting shut down because of COVID problems. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how it all plays out. How is it going in New York? How is obviously what are your views on the Major League Baseball lockout, Dan? Because I know you are a Major League Baseball fan. So, what are your thoughts on the current lockout? How important can Pulisic be for the growth of US soccer? He can be very, very important. When I was a kid, there were several high-profile US players playing in Europe growing up. And then, of course, Major League Soccer grew quite rapidly with David Beckham and other high-profile European-based players towards the end of their careers, such as Kaká, Pirlo, Gerrard, Ridgewell, the Wright Phillips brothers going over to the US, Wayne Rooney going over to the US a couple of years ago, have helped grow the game domestically in the MLS. The expansion policy that the MLS has, it has weathered the financial struggles of the first half of its existence. But Pulisic is very, very important. If he can be consistent, stay fit, be consistent, perform, play at the highest level for as long as possible, absolutely he can become the poster boy of the US game. I think every league and every nation needs their poster boy, their star player or star players. It would help if more good young players were coming through the system to grow, the game. You can't just rely on one player to carry a nation's growth in a sport. You need several high-profile players, a good core of players in the national side, developing at different teams to help grow the game. But domestically, the game is doing very, very well, and I think it can benefit from the Major League Baseball lockout at this time because they play at the same time of year the baseball plays, and if there is no season or if there is a reduced season, a lot of baseball fans, in their frustration, no doubt, will choose Major League Soccer and to a certain extent Major League Rugby to watch during the spring and summer months because there's clearly a frustration within Major League Baseball fan bases. I've seen it on social media in discussions in regards to the lockout. There is going to be, as it seems, there is no desire to negotiate from either side. The only proposal I've seen from Major League Baseball in regards to having any negotiations is we'll expand the playoffs. Whereas Major League Soccer, well, they didn't qualify for the last World Cup, the US, which was a massive blow, I think, to US soccer on the men's side of things. Pulisic is very, very important. In my opinion, very, very important. I think um, um, you know, as long as he plays at a good high level, stays fit, and there is no doubt how exceptionally skilled he is as a player. Um, there can be no doubt that that can spur further growth, further fandom, more kids wanting to play the game domestically in the US and Canada to a certain extent. Of course, you've got the World Cup coming up in 5 years' time, co-hosting with Mexico and Canada, which will be a massive shot in the arm. Hopefully, it's better than the '94 tournament. But I remember watching the '94 tournament. And as a kid, I didn't realise, looking back on it, and how poor a tournament that was for quality. At the time, I was just enjoying watching the sport. It was the first World Cup that I watched. So, yes, it is important that you have a player like Pulisic, which you can then, sell the merchandise, get people interested. Um, However, the US has lost players to other countries because of parentage, which has happened with Giuseppe Rossi, for example. He could have played for the US, he ended up choosing Italy. His career, however, got derailed by injury and some bad transfers and badly managed career, but he could have played for the US. Um, so there is that to bear in mind. The fact he's decided to choose the US rather, I think Croatia, I think he could play for as well if he chose to. He's decided to choose the US, which is a great thing. It's a loss for Croatia. They could have had him in their setup, even though he's never lived in Croatia. He's one of his parents, I believe his father is Croatian, of Croatian descent. Um, I wouldn't say the modern era started in '92. I would say the modern TV era did. I would say the modern era would be the '70s. Personally, after the '66 World Cup, I would say the '70s would be beginnings of what we now know as the modern era. Um, um, so we will see what happens. In regards to the modern era. I wouldn't say Maradona. I would say the current era is with the satellite TV deal. So '92 would be where a lot of people uh, the change in the Champions League format, the from the old Champions European Champions Cup to the Champions League format and the rebranding of the European Cup competitions. I would say the '90s is where the modern era changed and the footballing landscape changed with the more globalization, with a lot of South American players ending up in Europe, whereas before there was only a handful of South American superstars playing in Europe, and there were political reasons for that as well. I wouldn't say Maradona um, was the catalyst for what we call the modern era. It was more the TV companies and what I would call the Premier League having its TV rights debate. And I'm going to do a video on the Premier League on New Year's Day because it will be 30 years in 1992 since the Premier League started up, and it's very interesting to know some of the clubs that actually helped form the Premier League and where they are now. All of them are still in the Football League, which is very, very vitally important. What is interesting is clubs like Swindon Town and Oldham Athletic, which you may or may not have heard of, were Premier League clubs in 1992, and that is very important to look at where Premier League founding clubs were in '92. The league was bigger; it was 22 teams, not 20. So they shrunk the size of the league down, which means it was actually harder to win the Premier League in '92 to '96 than what it is now. You actually had to play more regular season games, but during the early Premier League era, English clubs were still banned from Europe. So you could get away with having those extra fixtures. So there is a correlation with the shrinking of the Premier League down to 20 teams and English teams reappearing in Europe again post the European ban because of the Hazel disaster and Hillsborough and other issues going on within UEFA and English football and the battle there and the loss of income because English clubs weren't allowed to um, to play or not. um, but I I wouldn't say the downfall of Maradona is the start of the modern era. The modern era was already sort of forming in the '70s with the growth of the Cup Winners' Cup, the UEFA Cup, the European Championship trophy. It just accelerated in the '90s. Maradona's downfall was just a parallel thing to that. Other players like Paul Merson and Paul Gascoigne, uh, English players, had similar issues with drugs and alcohol, and still do to this day. Um, Paul Merson's very open and honest about his issues with gambling, alcohol, and drug problems. Paul Gascoigne, while he's more open now. There were times where he wasn't, and so I wouldn't say there's any correlation with that. I think the amount of money in the game has exploded in the 90s. That has definitely changed. But I think you can definitely say the modern era starts in the late 60s when Jimmy Hill argued successfully to remove the upper cap on players' wages. There was technically a salary cap for professional players in the English game. Other leagues then adopted that. And that was in 1968 when Jimmy Hill stood down as Coventry City manager, went into working basically for the Players Union. And he argued that the salary cap, you could actually earn more money uh, being working on the roads, basically as a tarmacker. You could actually earn more money in the armed forces. You could earn more money doing basically working class jobs than playing professional sport. And back in the 60s and 70s, some of the injuries players sustained, Jesus Christ, some of the pitches they were playing on. When that wage cap was removed, a lot of clubs did face financial difficulty in the 70s and the 80s. It then culminated in a breakdown of communication between the Football League, which still runs the Championship, League One and League Two, and 16 clubs, which then expanded to 22 clubs in total that voted to form the Premier League. And there was stuff to do with the TV rights, the money in the game. Clubs were financially struggling. There were issues with attendance. The attendance wasn't great. There were issues with stadium infrastructure. Very interesting what happened post 92, and I will do a video on the Premier League in 1992, the founding clubs. Where are they now? I've done a video before, but of course, clubs have gone up and down the Football League pyramid and promotion, relegation, some financial issues for some of the clubs. Very, very interesting in 1992, the clubs that actually founded the Premier League. There was rumblings going on in about 1989, 1990 about the TV revenue, attendance issues, crowd trouble, football finances in general. Fast forward 30 years, we're still having the debates about the TV rights deal, revenue sharing, player wages, crowd trouble, stadium infrastructure, accessibility, etc., etc., etc. There's still a lot going on. We've just moved on 30 years. The same issues still apply. Just oh dear. But it is very, very interesting. So when you see Ipswich Town, back in the early 80s, they won the UEFA Cup, and they won the FA Cup in the late 70s. Ipswich Town had a period alongside Nottingham Forest where they were two of the best sides in England. Right now, Ipswich are playing in League One, and Nottingham Forest are playing in the Championship. So that's very, very interesting. And Nottingham Forest, sorry, won the European Cup twice in back-to-back seasons, and they're the first club to win the European Cup to get relegated to the third tier of the domestic league they play in. Kyrie Irvine. Let's have a look who Kyrie Irvine is quickly. I need to just double check who, because some of these American sports stars, I have no idea who you're talking about, unless it's an NHL player. I wouldn't have a clue. So it shows how closely I follow Kyrie Irvine. Oh, he's an NBA player, right? Don't follow the NBA personally. Right, so he's re-entered the COVID-19 protocols. As I said, with the NHL, multiple teams shut down in the NHL in regards to protocols and too many players. Uh, so let me just send a message. The fact that he's re-entered protocols a day after his return is definitely concerning. I don't know the full ins and outs of his situation, why he was out the lineup with Brooklyn before, but with what's happening right now, with what we've seen in the last 6 weeks, with rugby union teams playing in the United Rugby Championship, which involves European South African teams, 4 teams getting stuck in South Africa for a lengthy period, and players testing positive on return, with 3 teams in English football. Again, this is a situation. Tyler Bertuzzi for the Detroit Red Wings cannot play in the Canadian cities under the league agreement between the provinces and states. It'll be interesting to see if Tyler Bertuzzi is a Detroit Red Wing, because he's also been in COVID protocols as well. Will be allowed to play against Buffalo, the Islanders, and the Rangers in those games when Detroit play those teams in New York. That in itself, with the fact he's also one of those players refusing to get a vaccination, and therefore it actually hurts the team. it actually is hurting his team. While I, in my opinion, however, believe vaccinations should be voluntary and there should be no compulsory vaccination mandates, and that's just from a standpoint of freedom of choice. The way we're seeing things in the UK as well, we're seeing it in the UK is made up of 4 countries. We're seeing COVID passports and COVID passes being brought in for indoor venues and outdoor venues, so sports arenas. We've seen um, how that is interesting. How will that impact his salary? Does he defer salary if he's not going to be able to play at least half the games? But is there 2 teams in New York State? I believe there's 2 teams in New York State, isn't there? There's the Brooklyn and there's who's the team that play at Madison Square Garden? There's 2 teams that play in New York. In that regard, he can't play over half the games in a regular season, and then you've got to factor in the playoffs. Should his team make the playoffs, he can't play over half the games that the NBA has got scheduled. That is ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. Surely, I mean, the leagues have a policy of not forcing the Knicks. That's all. Um, Surely the situation should be, from what I understand, there's no vaccination, no play policy. It's still voluntary. That is what I understand with the NFL, the NBA, the NHL. I don't know about Major League Baseball because that's currently on lockout. In rugby league and the AFL in Australia, again, there is no compulsory vaccination policy, as far as I'm aware. I think the AFL might have brought it in because of the majority of games being played in Melbourne, where most of the teams are based. But as far as I'm aware, it's still a voluntary system in professional sports. It does make it very interesting, though, with the NBAPA, the Players Association. What are they going to be? They will have to be involved in this situation, I have no doubt. Same with the NHLPA. There's only a handful of NHL players that are unvaccinated right now. Most have decided to get the vaccination. I think Tyler Bertuzzi, when he tested positive, has changed a few opinions in the NHL. Kyrie Irving, if he has a medical exemption, I think he should be allowed to play. If he doesn't have a medical exemption, then he's shot himself in the foot, unless it's for religious reasons. The only reasons why I believe you shouldn't get the vaccination is religious or medical exemptions. And then you would have to have the situation where the Players Association would have to fight very vigorously. And this is where the NBA head office needs to negotiate with, the Ontario in Canada. He won't be able to play in Canada either. He won't be able to play the games against the Blue Jays. Not the Blue Jays, the Raptors. Because the Canadian policy is if you're unvaccinated, you cannot cross the border. So when Brooklyn want to play the Raptors, he can't play. He can't play in his home state. And I don't know about the rest of the US. So already he's limiting himself. Therefore, I think he would have to defer his salary. He would have to take a pay cut. You're paying someone to be available for an 82 game schedule plus playoffs. So it's a tricky situation, however. As long as I believe, as long as the players obey the protocols and they regularly test daily, it shouldn't matter if you're vaccinated or not, really, quite frankly. If, however, for example, where the Raptors are playing in Canada, there is a rule if you're not vaccinated, you cannot cross the border, then you can't play games against the Raptors, quite fairly. Yeah, well, this is where sports stars being role models, it creates a social issue. If you want to get uptake, especially, and what we've seen over here in the UK is some minority ethnic groups. I hate using that phrase, but some of the people of Afro Caribbean background and South Asian backgrounds, and some of the Southeast Asian backgrounds are the uptake in vaccine uptake is lower. So when you have someone of his background, being an Afro Caribbean or African American, refusing to get the vaccine, it does impact those minority groups when you're trying to encourage them with better public health and access to better public health and more social responsibility. They will. It is a tricky one. The fact that he's one of the best in his position as well, and it's hurting his. it is definitely impacting his team um, massively. It has to, and therefore, um, I don't know what his team do, what Brooklyn do. They are definitely in a position where it is impacting the team. He's brought COVID into the locker room, so therefore it then fuck, I've just done something wrong. It's impacting um, a whole host of things. It's now impacting. We will see how things play out, and well, yeah, we'll just have to see how it all plays out. I have concerns, however, that with things as they are with this new variant um, spreading, um, hang on a sec. Um, but you know, Harvey Elliott. In I I think with what we've seen with Harvey Elliott, there's a lot coming in. As a Blackburn fan, we've had some real struggles in the last decade. So we've lost a lot of good young players that have come through the team, uh, and we've let them go. So in that regard, it is a shame. My thoughts. I mean, because we've been stuck on the edge of the playoffs, we've been mid-table in the championship for so long, and a lot of young players have come through the team. We've got a great history of developing youth players and young players. This season, we're looking like we could challenge for promotion back to the Premier League after a long absence. Harvey Elliott, I wouldn't say Uh, I, oh, my mate Rob is not happy because he's a Fulham fan. Harvey Elliott played there. That's not down to the player. That's down to the agents and the club. They obviously couldn't come to an agreement when it came to contract extensions. Um, whether Harvey Elliott wanted to stay at Fulham or not, that this is where player agents have a lot of power. When they say player power, it's actually player agents power. And when you get a signing on fee with another club, the player agent still gets his bonus. But that is also on Fulham not being able to negotiate a contract that the player was happy with via his agent and his advisors. Um, so there's a whole lot to digest with that. But I don't really follow club league football. When I watch football, I'm watching the cup competitions. They're more fun. I used to follow the league more religiously than I do now. Um, I haven't really followed league games for some time. My interest in football is different to what it was. Even though I most of the videos on this channel are football related, soccer related. If you live in the US, should I say? Um, in in regards to my sports fandom, rugby league and ice hockey are higher up the sports I enjoy. And there are a lot of reasons for that. I watch more league. I mean, the NRL. I've got a subscription to their website, so I've watched every regular season game for the last 2.5 years. Uh, Ice hockey. I mean, I went to every single home game of my local team for best part of 5 years. It was more accessible. It was more available to me to watch, and therefore it was something that occupied a lot of my time. Um, so when we're discussing the regular season and all that, and when it comes to club football, I prefer the cup competitions. Um, it's where form can go out the window on a given day. And now that we've seen the FA removing replays from the third round onwards to reduce fixture congestion, um, you know, it, it it means now it is straight knockout football as of the next round going forward. Now, you could argue that actually harms the lower league clubs. It harms those clubs that need a good cup run for revenue streams because of the league they're in or their financial situation for whatever reason. But what we've seen with a lot of managers in the professional game, they are concerned about fixture congestion. They are concerned about workload for players. That is not going away. When we've got high profile club managers say that they are concerned about the amount of games players are playing in a given period over a calendar year or in a 9-month period, we have to take that seriously. That has to be taken seriously. When FIFA are proposing a 2-year World Cup cycle, that goes against reducing fixture congestion. It actually condenses the schedule more dangerously, and you have to play more games in a short space of time. The difference between football and other sports is the amount of mileage you cover in a game. Rugby league, rugby union, ice hockey, NFL, these other team contact sports, you're actually doing a lot less running around. Ice hockey, you've got regular rotation with line changes, NFL regular stoppages, and CFL regular stoppages when there's a down. Rugby league, bit more bit more motion than rugby union, but again, um, stoppages in play, more regular, more frequent. Rugby union is phases of play. I think 5 or 6, 7 on average, and then it's a breakdown in play and you reset. So the amount of mileage a player will cover is a lot less than football. People go, football, it's not the most brutal sport. No, it isn't. But it's one of the more physically demanding where you are running for 90. Some players who play every game of the season and every minute of the season, they're covering 15 to 20 miles or kilometres a game, depending on how the style of player their team plays. That's a lot of miles. That's basically running a marathon in 90 minutes around in motion, constantly moving. You're never stationary. Whereas in other contact sports, there's regular rotation. So ice hockey, rugby union, you have more substitutions, scrums, lineouts. There's lots of stoppages in play. Rugby league, interchange bench, so some players will be rotated regularly. So football itself is exhausting. And when managers are coming out saying we have concerns about, the amount of games players are playing, the amount of wear and tear they're going through, we've seen so many players have heart issues and collapse and being seriously ill in the last couple of years, on and off the field. So Ike Casillas in training a couple of years back, Christian Eriksen this summer in the Euros. You've had a whole host of players like Sergio Aguero being forced to retire, Manuel Almunia a few years back when he was going through a transfer and they found a heart problem on his medical. Goalkeepers don't move as much as outfield players, but when you've got so many players having health issues, most to do with the circulatory system of your heart and lungs, it is generally concerning. Um, and so that has to be factored in. Absolutely. There's no denying that there is definitely concerns about the health and welfare of the players. No doubt in my mind. Um, and when I do videos on player welfare in a variety of sports, I don't get a lot of views, and this is ridiculous. This is what I find ridiculous. Is a major issue. It doesn't matter if it's concussions in ice hockey or NFL or rugby, either code. It doesn't matter if it's players collapsing on the pitch in football with heart problems. Um, has any World Cup taken place in the winter like the next one will? If they have taken place in the Southern Hemisphere, yes. So Argentina in '78, Brazil. Technically, most of Brazil was in winter in 2014 because it's the Southern Hemisphere winter. Uruguay in 1950. South Africa in 2010. That was in the Southern Hemisphere winter, the Northern Hemisphere summer. But no World Cup in football has taken place at that time of year. The only World Cups to take place at that time of year really are the Rugby League and Rugby Union World Cups, which normally take place in October, November. So even then, it's later than what you would see with the Rugby Union World Cup in Japan, which was a September, October, November period. Rugby League World Cup was meant to take place in October, November this year and has been pushed back a year. The only World Cups to take place generally at the end of the calendar year would be the Rugby Union, Rugby League. We've seen an Summer Olympics take place in September in Australia, and that was again to do with the climatic conditions somewhat. But this is the first time a World Cup has actually been physically moved from its normal slot to 6 months later. It's the first time, and we will never ever see a World Cup take place at this time of year ever again in a FIFA World Cup at least. It will never happen ever again. Um, it's already causing headaches for scheduling in the European leagues, where the majority of players will be coming from, who will be representing countries at the World Cup, are the European-based players. The majority, although there's quite a few from Japan as well, very similar league structure to ours, the Japanese league. So the Northern Hemisphere leagues are supplying most of the players who will be playing at this tournament. They're being heavily impacted. Even the MLS is going to have a very disrupted off season, and the MLS will be providing some of the players. The South American leagues, I think, are the ones best adapted to having the World Cup at this time of year. In saying that, it's definitely posing some fixturing headaches for the professional leagues. So the club country debate comes into it. I can't see this World Cup being pushed back like the Rugby League World Cup, for example, and the Euros and the Women's Euros being rescheduled because of pandemic. I think there's been so much controversy over the awarding of this World Cup to Qatar. FIFA now has to go along with getting it played. I don't think I don't know how it's going to play out. I think the atmosphere in stadiums is going to be poor. I think there's already concerns there's not enough hotel space in Qatar, um, to accommodate, let alone all the fans, all the media, and all the playing squads and their support staff. There's not enough hotel space in the country, so there's already logistical and infrastructure issues outside of the stadium situation. Uh, and so there's a lot of question marks over the tournament, and there's a lot of things that are concerning about this tournament. To be fair, I am sort of excited for it in a certain aspect. I love international sport. I don't care what sport we're talking about. I do love international competition because that's the best of the best. Um, it does mean, yeah, I can, in the winter months. Um, but for me, obviously, it's the NHL is my favourite league, and therefore I want to watch the NHL with the World Cup's on. So I have to bear that in mind. But it is, the best tournament, the biggest tournament in the world for any sport, bigger than the Olympics. Um, I think I am excited for it, but I'm also nervous and apprehensive about the tournament. I don't think the atmosphere in stadiums is going to be great. I don't think the quality of play is going to be as good as we hope. I think the weather conditions, how are players going to train? Training sessions, the heat, even though it's taking place at a later time of year, it's the climatic conditions are definitely going to impact how the games are played. The TVs, I mean, how they're going to fixture it in for the European market for TV and the US market. I mean, those kickoff times are going to be at really weird hours. And bearing in mind, the west coast of the US is 8 hours behind the UK, 9 hours behind mainland Europe. The east coast is 5 to 6 hours. The Midwest is 7, 8, or 8.5 hours. So the US Canadian market's going to be very interesting. It's going to be interesting to see the viewership figures in North America. It's going to be very interesting to see the viewership figures in Europe and the footballing nations of Asia, for example. Very, very interested in the viewership figures. Um, the time of year it's taking place, it is what you call the holiday season. A lot of people will be off work, would have booked vacation time or holiday time to take some time off. So there will be more people at home, which may help some of the viewership figures. But I'm more interested in the atmosphere in the grounds, you know, in the World Cup, the amount of fans that actually go to support their nations. Um, it's going to be a very interesting tournament. I think we could have a shock winner in this tournament. I really do. I think we could have a shock winner in the tournament that we're not expecting. A team is going to come from left field. An underdog could do a Greece like they did in Euro 2004. Though the Greek side had a good system that actually worked in stifling the opposition, and they actually did play rather well in that tournament. They were just outside, but we could see an underrated, unexpected nation do very well, or win the whole thing. We could really see world football turn on its head. I honestly believe that. Um, and we'll see what happens. I mean, we're still a full year away, pretty much from the knockout stages, so there's still a long time to go before we get to the tournament. But it is creating fixturing problems for the domestic leagues in Europe, especially. We're going to see a very disrupted regular season um, over here in Europe. Not all fans are happy with that. Um, I wouldn't say it competes with less sports in the summer. The summer is very interesting. Ironically, it's when a lot of the sports that it will be competing with for TV viewership have their off seasons as well. It may actually benefit sports like cricket and rugby league having the tournament moved to the winter. It may actually benefit sports in Europe that play in the summer. It may actually benefit their viewership figures. We may see viewership figures of other sports that normally take place at the same time as the World Cup actually go up because the World Cup has been moved. So it may actually be a benefit to other sports moving it. But it's a very interesting topic. I mean, from the day it was awarded to Qatar, there were question marks over the whole bidding process. We now know there was a lot of corruption involved. Um, the so yeah, there's a lot of question marks over the tournament. Will they even complete all the infrastructure in time? Um, will they actually increase the amount of hotel space for fans, journalists, support staff, and the playing groups? Because we do know there's not enough lodging infrastructure in the country. It's going to be the smallest nation for population size ever to host a World Cup, because when Uruguay hosted, its population was still bigger than Qatar's is now, which is why ironic with population explosion in South America. So there is a lot of questions over the tournament before a ball has even been kicked. Normally, we have a Confederations Cup tournament. That's not taking place, which is a shame. It would have been great to have a Confederations Cup tournament to have. Coolest interaction you've had with a professional player? Well, I got to meet both the Liverpool and Sheffield Wednesday squads in 1996. I got to meet David James and Stan Collymore and John Barnes at Anfield. Um, that was pretty cool. I was very, very young at the time, but it's still I've got all their I've got all their autographs of both sets of players who played that day. Um, that's a pretty fond memory I have as a kid. But when you're really short, you think they're massive human beings, but actually, if you think about it, David James is quite a big imposing figure, but John Barnes is actually quite a big. Well, I mean, John Barnes is quite a big man. He's not a small player, and for a winger, he was quite well built. Um, I think that was possibly one of my fondest memories. But then meeting the All Blacks in '97 when they were training at my school, using some of our sports facilities to do some indoor training was pretty cool as well. Um, during their '97 autumn November tour series in the Northern Hemisphere, that was pretty cool. I got to meet Jonah Lomu and the All Blacks, so that was a pretty cool moment as well. Um, I've got to meet some of the 2003 England World Cup winning rugby union squad. They they train locally when they're in international camp down the road from where I live, and I used to actually work in the area where they live on my waste collection round. So I used to actually see the England squad going into their training camp during the Six Nations and during the World Cup preps and all that. So I got to meet Ben Cohen, Steve Thompson, Jason Leonard, Sir Clive Woodward. I've met some pretty big name rugby union players back in the early 2000s. Um, I went to school with Max Laheath, the current Bristol Bears prop. Used to play for London Irish and Bath and the Melbourne Rebels in Australia. Um, so I've been lucky. I think in a way I met Gary Lineker a number of times. I've been lucky in the sense that I have. I mean I've met John Terry. Not a big fan of John Terry. Not gonna lie. I've met a fair few professional sports players. I've met quite a few British ice hockey players who play for the national side and all that, and in the professional leagues over here. I'm friends with a couple of them. I've been pretty lucky, but I wouldn't say I'm overawed in a sense. When I was younger, I was a bit starstruck meeting David James and John Barnes and the entire Liverpool and Sheffield Wednesday. I've got that program somewhere. It's really annoying me where it is. Um, um, so that's interesting. Oh, great! So London Broncos have had yet, what is their seventh stadium they've now had. The Plough Lane, I think will benefit the Broncos. It's a better playing stadium than Trailfinders. It's a grass pitch. Um, it's a brand new facility, Plough Lane, and Wimbledon were making money off that as well. Um, and Wimbledon haven't got a lot of cash. Um, Midlands Hurricanes, Coventry. I mean, look, we've seen what's happened with Hemel Hempstead, you know, becoming the Ottawa races and then going to Cornwall. Um, there is a lot of money problems in the lower levels of the game and in the Super League as well. Wakefield Trinity Stadium is a shambles. I'm not going to lie. Odsal with Bradford Bulls is a shambles. The infrastructure is shocking. I mean, the London Broncos haven't had a permanent home. They actually started off at Craven Cottage, ironically. They were originally called Fulham Rugby League Football Club. The London Broncos, their original home was Craven Cottage. They played at Valley. They played at the Stoop. They've played all over London. The Broncos. They've never had a permanent home where they can say this is our stadium. But to be fair, they played in blue and yellow before. They played in a variety of kit colours of the Broncos. Their mid-90s kit colours, I think, were the most hideous. Um, they the Broncos. There was a while they were called Harlequins when they were sharing the Stoop, um, and they played in the Harlequins colours. If I'm brutally honest, they just need to find a permanent home. As long as Wimbledon are happy to have them as tenants, that brings stability. They've had money issues off the field, um, and so therefore this brings them some stability. It's a shame that Ealing Rugby Club are losing them as a tenant at Trailfinders, because that's helped Ealing Rugby Club make a fair bit of money and help them financially as having the London Broncos as their tenants for as long as they have. But the new Plough Lane is a much more modern facility, better playing surface in my opinion, even though it's grass, modern facility, basically a brand new stadium. It's only been open a year or two. That, from my point of view, will help the Broncos having better facilities to play and train in, um, and it will also benefit AFC Wimbledon with some of their issues they've had financially over the years with their rise and fall from the Premier League and all that, being reformed after MK Dons. The old ownership moved. That will benefit Wimbledon, AFC Wimbledon as well, and it's a beneficially mutual relationship between the two teams. Um, but London Broncos have ground shared before with Harlequins. They've done the rugby union ground share before. They've done the football ground share before with Fulham and Charlton. Um, yeah, I mean, I think AFC Wimbledon, they were playing at Kingston upon Thames, there, Kingston Rovers or whatever it was called, stadium, while Plough Lane was being built. I think they envisioned this in mind. And the area that Wimbledon play in, there's a lot of rugby union clubs as well, such as London Scottish and clubs like that that may also go, hang on a sec, can we down the line be, you know, um, can we also use all facilities? So Wimbledon, AFC Wimbledon's ownership have played it quite well here. Um, the London Broncos go to a part-time status. I don't think that remains that way for long. I think having a better stadium, and Wimbledon's not too far from the main line, which also is on the main line to Twickenham as well, in and out of London Waterloo. So actually, that is a very, very good piece of logistical thinking, I think, by the Broncos as well, where they were playing at Ealing wasn't too far from the main line of Paddington. Now they're on the main line to Waterloo. Again, good transport links from the underground on the underground network. They've done a very good bit on their logistics side of things as well for the away fans, and Wimbledon is quite a good sporting area in London, so in southwest London. So they're trying to attract the money from Surrey and Berkshire to come in um, with moving to Wimbledon. That's a very good move, I think, on their part. Surrey's quite a wealthy area. Um, it's a good market to tap into. This is why I'm surprised that with the Ottawa races relocating, they didn't go back to Hemel Hempstead. They decided to go to Cornwall, not the wealthiest area in the south of England, if you want to grow it. And Coventry moving, out of the Midlands Hurricanes moving. That is a problem, but their attendances were really, really low. But rugby league in general, not just the Super League, is having money problems. The TV deal. We are going to see some more free to air games. We're going to see free to air games from next season, which is a boost. It's not enough. It's not enough. The Challenge Cup, they need to get more Challenge Cup games on free to air TV, more than just the quarter-final stage onwards on BBC, on the main channel, rather than just on the website. They need to do more there to increase the viewership. The World Cup being delayed has definitely hurt rugby league. There is obviously government loans going into the RFL. We need to see that properly distributed between all the clubs. They need to really support the game in the north, absolutely, but also grow the game in the south, because as long as they've got this narrow-minded, traditional location mindset, this very protectionist mindset, rugby union is going to win the hearts and minds grassroots battle, which has been winning for quite some time. There's huge areas of the north of England as well that are rugby union hotbeds as well that rugby league is losing out in, um, and that is a massive problem that needs to be addressed. Um, Yeah, I think they might. With the collapse of London Welsh and London Scottish struggling, they could definitely. And there's a big Australian and South African and New Zealander expat and Pacific Island expat community in the suburbs of South and West London. There's a massive Australian, especially Australian and Kiwi um, expat community in London, and they could definitely pick up more fans, definitely, and grow the player base. They've already proven that in their last Super League season, 8 of the main squad were through the London Broncos Academy. Actually came through the system through the youth grades, so that made it to first grade. So for me, yes, it's a big move. Um, I would also like to see York City back and Sheffield Eagles as well. Huddersfield, no, Huddersfield being where the game was founded, and Castleford, classy Castle. I don't mind Castleford and Huddersfield, as Huddersfield have got a nice stadium, like the John Smith Stadium. I'm sorry, I like Huddersfield Stadium. The history behind Huddersfield as well, and their importance to the sport cannot be understated. If they get relegated, it should be for playing reasons, not because whatever. Castleford, yeah, their stadium isn't great, but I like the style of play that they play. Um, but what you're suggesting would you'd have to. It was what they did with the NRL with rationalisation. It didn't go down with the fan base. It actually cost in the short to medium term a lot of fans um, for the game in Australia. And Australia is having the same debate about expansion, where to expand next. Make it more of a national game. That debate's also being had over in Australia. Um, the AFL is winning the battle over there. Rugby union is winning the battle over here. and that's the situation rugby league finds itself in. It's the underdog league. It's the underdog sport. Um, and while it would be nice to see the Broncos and the Knights, and even the Sheffield Eagles and Featherstone Rovers get into the top flight, obviously the Broncos, out of all those teams in recent times, been more successful, spending more seasons in the top flight. The decision to go with Leeds Centurions again, massive error. Um, Not even close to being competitive. Should have gone to Toulouse a season before they got promoted. Should have gone to the Broncos, in my opinion. Um, with what the Broncos did the last time they were in the Super League, when they were said, "Oh, everyone's going to get relegated," they really battled. And they were said, "People going, they're not going to win a single game," and they actually won. They went down to the last two weeks of the season for them. It was their points differential that did them. Um, but they battled tooth and nail to stay up. Really gave it a go. The Toronto Wolfpack experiment, the pros and cons of going looking at the Canadian market and the North American market. I think there was better ways of growing the game in North America than what was attempted. Um, Obviously, rugby league's realising that rugby union's winning the battle in North America. Um, but with the current situation, with what we've seen with the pandemic and each country having different travel and quarantine rules and vaccination rules, I think it was the right decision to not go with the Ottawa races. I think that decision was forced, but where they've relocated to, well, Cornwall, give it a go. Again, you've got to look. The closest teams to them would have been the Coventry Midlands Hurricanes and would have been the London Scholars. So even then, that's a 6 hour. That's you got to. That's. Yeah. Well, that would be. Yeah. I mean, they're still in the Midlands, so they can still call themselves the Midlands Hurricanes. Much like London Broncos, they need to find a better venue to play at, which actually means it's more cost effective. But yeah, with um, the Cornish expansion, as we'll call it, or relocation of Ottawa races, the closest teams to them are the Midland Hurricanes and the London Scholars. So it's going to be very, very interesting how that plays out for them. They should have gone back to become the Hempstead Stags again, or gone to St Albans or Watford, or High Wycombe, because there are stadiums there, have hosted rugby union, rugby league before that are appropriate. High Wycombe, Wycombe Wanderers Stadium, Watford, they've had rugby union teams. I think Wasps played at Watford for a long time, or Saracens were at Watford for a long time. Barnet, they've had rugby union. They could have even gone to the Thames Valley, Swindon or Reading and Medeski. You know, could have quite easily gone there, and but they've decided to go cool. Why that decision's been made is beyond me, personally. I don't think that makes a lot of logistical sense. It is a rugby union heartland. It's the main Cornwall. The main sport is rugby union, and then sailing and surfing. So not really. I don't know the decision making behind that. Rugby union is well entrenched with the Cornish Pirates and all the local club teams that play in the southwest divisions of the rugby union pyramid. Bristol would have been a better location, personally, if you want to go to the southwest. Taunton, better logistical with the motorway network and the railway network. Really surprised with that decision. Really, really surprised. But then Bristol, Taunton, and Exeter have got well-established rugby union teams. But Cornwall, logistically, just with the transport side of things, with away fans and away teams, that's going to be a financial nightmare. Absolutely fine. If they were closer to the Thames Valley, the South East or the South Midlands, would have made far more logistical sense. With the fact that there's already teams playing in London and the Midlands, and it would have made far more logistical sense. Maybe put them in Worcester would have made more sense. Going to Cornwall was made that, in my eyes, that is a massive, massive error. Somewhere like Swindon or Reading would have made perfect sense with the M4 corridor, and good rail and road links to the Midlands and the North. That, in my mind, makes no sense going to Cornwall. Really doesn't. It really doesn't. Um, I like the fact that rugby league is going. Okay, we're growing in the southern half of the UK. That's brilliant, but it's the wrong part. Financially, Cornwall is the one of the poorest areas in the UK for average salary. It is. Wouldn't have thought that, would you? So economically, it's not the wealthiest area. Transport links, there's no motorways, and apart from the main line from Penzance and Truro going up to Exeter and Bristol, um, again, there's not a whole host of transport links that are easy. Um, the motorway network stops in Devon, um, a good fair few hours driving. Um, Again, we're hypothesizing where they could have located. How much money does the ownership group have they've got to find something that financially, when they're paying their tenancy for whatever rugby union or football club would host them, that's got to be viable as well. And there's a whole host of smaller stadiums around Reading, rugby union stadiums that would be appropriate for the level they're playing at. Um, Reading Rams, they've got a very modern main stand. Newbury have got the rugby club as well. They could have gone to a more Thames Valley location, and that's could be a slight bias on my point. But if they want to go into the south, the Thames Valley would have made more sense just for the Coventry or the Midland Hurricanes and London Scholars being in the same league they're playing in would have made more sense logistically. Um, but the decision's been made. They've decided to go with Cornwall. Yeah, the Reading Rams. I mean, I technically their stadium is actually in Charville. It's not actually in Reading at all. It's actually in Charville, which is actually in the borough of Woking, which is ironic. Um, but in saying that, why do Italians hate Neapolitan? Naples is part of Italy. It's the north-south Italy divide. Italian Neapolitan Napoli is the third city in Italy, so I don't know where you're getting that one from. Um, why do other Italians hate? I think it's the north-south divide. Much like in the US, you've got the north-south divide, the Mason-Dixie line. It's a regional thing. Italy's a very regional nation, very very regional. It's more social than sporting when it comes to that kind of debate, and I can debate that on the other channel. I'd rather debate that on the other channel. You have to look at the history of Italian unification. The southern Italy was a separate country. It was the Kingdom of Two Sicilies, completely different country, different set of laws, institutions in place until 1861. So that's a very long standing. Um, the unification of Italy is an interesting topic. Um, it's something that requires quite a bit of time to discuss. The, the the rivalry between Napoli, Rome, Milan, and Florence and Turin, the big cities in Italy. It's a very complex political and social history that you have to discuss. And then there's the sporting standpoint as well, where the most successful Italian teams are from the northern half of Italy as well. It when it comes to football, it's a very complex topic to discuss, and I would need to have about 3 years of your life to discuss it. You can't do it in a short video. You can't do it in a short conversation. The history behind Italian unification is about a 300-year process that goes back to the Italian wars of the 1550s all the way through to the Italian unification in the 1860s, 1870s. It's a long period of history. The Renaissance period all the way through to the early modern period to unification, much like the German unification as well. There was a lot of conflict in mainland Europe after Napoleon fell from power. It gets really, yeah. You had the republics, the great maritime republics of Siena, Geneva, Venetia, Ancona had a bit of power at one point. You had the mainland republics of Florence and Lucca, and Milan and the duchies, and all the Italian city-states to the north, and in the south you had the Kingdom of Two Sicilies. And that is the history behind that is a different historical path, with the Spanish and French involvement down in the south of Italy, and the Norman involvement, and it gets really complex. To talk about modern Italian here, it gets really, after the fall of the Roman Empire, it all gets a bit messy in Italy. At one point there was I think about 30 different city states in Italy, of varying levels of importance and power. Um, some were absorbed by others, and then the Kingdom of Naples and the Kingdom of Sicily formed to become the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. Apart from when Napoleon was around, and Murat being king of Naples for a while, um, and his stepson Eugene de Beauharnais being viceroy of Italy, which was the northern half. It gets complicated. Um, from a sporting standpoint as well, is from those long-standing social standpoints, the southern Italian clubs, and the Sicilian clubs and the Sardinian clubs, and the north of Rome, it does get. Oh, it does. There is a lot of the political and social side of Italian history. It does actually have that involvement. It goes back to the formation of the modern state of Italy, as we know as Italy today, between 1861 and 1871. There was a few political things going on. Um, the constitution that Italy has is obviously post World War II, but even without the monarchy, the Italian state as we know it today, with a few adjustments to some of the northern borders, is what you see today. Um, yeah, Juve and Inter fans. I mean, I think there is definitely something to be said. Lazio are quite bad as well. Yes, Malta did nearly become part of the UK, like Gibraltar. I think would have had similar status to Gibraltar does now. Um, Malta decided to go down its independence path, rightly so, but they still speak English as one of the official languages, alongside Maltese, Italian, and Arabic, and a bit of French. Maltese is a very interesting language. It's got. I'm now doing a history video. It's pretty ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But yes, the history side of the social side impacts the sporting side as well when it comes to Italian sport. Um, the more rural south, the more industrialized north. Very similar, I think you'll find, to the US, with the more industrialized north and the more rural south, and the investment in infrastructure and the investment in uh, you know uh, sports teams, where the most majority of sports teams are. You can see a lot of similarities between the US and places like Italy and Spain, with industrialized areas having a lot of the sporting success and the money, and the more rural areas and having less. Um, Very, very interesting. But yes, the social side of things links into the sporting side of things. The political side of things as well has an impact. Um, so the fans from Torino and Milano, when it comes to fans from Napoli, the Neapolitans, the Milanese, and the Piedmontese fan bases, the Turinese. Yeah, I'm using Italian words here. Weird. Um, No, I don't watch Sports Personality of the Year. It's a farce how they select people. A lot of them on there, like, who are these people? There are far more deserving, Team of the Year, um, and all that. I'm not interested in Sports Personality. I haven't been interested in it since I was a kid. Um, I have no interest in it, and it's sad for me to say that, because I used to, but no. Um, not for a good while now. Not for about 15 years. Yeah, not since I was shit. God, it's 15 years ago. How old? I've got no remember how old I am. I'm 32 now. I've not had an interest in it. I don't. I've met Gary Lineker. He's actually quite a nice bloke away from the TV. Um, he's a very interesting character. I don't mind Gary Lineker. What I do mind is the BBC not being as impartial as it should be. When it comes to its journalism. How Dan Rowan still got a job, considering that Ron Atkinson was very, very sacked for very similar comments. and Dan Rowan's had a lot of complaints against him as a journalist. Um, is in my mind a joke. Um, so there's a whole host of reasons why I'm not a massive fan of the BBC. But you cannot fault their Olympic coverage. You cannot fault their World Cup, Euros, um, what other coverage can't you fault? The FA Cup. When it comes to some of the things, Six Nations, some of the sports rights they've maintained. Um, I know mental health in sport is important, and I think Tony Adams, I think, is a good advocate for addiction support and mental health services with what he does with his foundation and his clinics that he's set up. Um, Alex Scott, I think, obviously she's now retired from playing. I think she obviously has a career in the media, and fair play to her. I've got no problem with Alex Scott. Um, I can definitely see the tick box exercise with the BBC. However, in we've got to get the minorities on the TV rather than the best available. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for growing, the journalistic backgrounds of people, the back in the journalistic industry, the media industry. But they've got to be good at what they do, not just because of who they are. And a lot of them have decided to go from professional athletes into journalism, and that's fine. People like Dion Dublin, are from minority background, are far better in the media and Jermaine Genius are far better than Alex Scott. They're much more capable. Um, Claire Balding, you've got a lesbian and a woman. She's from the LGBT community, and she's been on TV for 25, 30 years. And she's a cancer survivor. She ticks loads of boxes, but she's the wrong colour skin. I'm I'm colourblind when it comes to what I see on TV. I'm not actually colourblind. I'm colourblind in the sense that if you're good enough, you're good enough. Stop playing the gender card or the race card. That pisses me off. That does nothing to actually increase diversity. It actually creates resistance to the multicultural society that we are. I think there is definitely an agenda, of a forced agenda. Um, I've got nothing against female commentators and female presenters. Some of them are actually better than some of the men. Um, but yeah, that's also on the editors and directors side of the programming, telling them you've got to say this. Gary Lineker's been involved in TV journalism now for 20 odd years. 25 since he retired as a player. He's been hosting Match of the Day for a long time. Um, so for Lineker, it's like Jimmy Hill. Jimmy Hill was a bit Marmite when he was alive, and he was presenting Match of the Day, and he was and I think Match of the Day has gone downhill since Alan Hansen and Mark Lawrenson. Alan Hansen retiring and Mark Lawrenson having less of involvement on Match of the Day. I like Mark Lawrenson. Um, I do think that the quality of presenting has gone downhill since Alan Hansen stood down as a pundit. And I think Alan Hansen could see what was happening within the mainstream media 11 years ago. I think he could see the writing was on the wall. Personally, I've got no problem with Gary Lineker. I've grown up with Gary Lineker. I've met him multiple times. I'm the same age as one of his sons, so I play his kids sport at school because he only lives in Sunningdale. So at schoolboy level, I played against his kids. As a parent and as away from his media commitments, he runs football academy kind of training camps in the summer, and summer camps for kids. He does a lot of charity work, and he's a pretty average bloke away from what you see on the TV cameras. He's not he's not a bad bloke, to be fair. I think what you're seeing is the editors of the programs and the producers and the directors are saying this is what we want our content to be, and he obviously wants to keep his job. You've got to remember, at some point he'll be classed as too old. You've got to retire now. That's just what's going to happen. But he wasn't, 10, 15 years ago when he was younger doing his bit, no one was complaining about Gary Lineker. No one. But Jimmy Hill, if you're old enough and remember Jimmy Hill, which I do, and I think you do as well because you're a bit older than me, and Alan Hansen on Match of the Day, when Gary Lineker first started on Match of the Day, um, Jimmy Hill was not necessarily the most popular pundit on there. Alan Hansen was the most popular, in my opinion. And I definitely noticed a quality drop since Alan Hansen retired from journalism and frontline journalism and took a back seat and decided to focus on his other business interests and take us and walk away from sport. The fact Alan Hansen never got involved in coaching is of any nature is stunning to me. Um, One of the best defenders the UK has ever produced. Brilliant player. The fact that he has decided to walk away from the sport and sports journalism in general tells you enough, all you need to know. Brilliant player, brilliant journalist, brilliant TV, pundit. The fact that he has walked away from discussing the sport that he played and was involved with so long tells you all you need to know about the direction that we are taking, and that was over a decade ago. That tells you all you need to know. On the mental health side of things, I'm all for that. On the, you know, sports stars doing a lot of charity work, I'm all for that. So Juan Mato and Marcus Rashford should rightly get the plaudits that they do for their off-field endeavours when it comes to charity. Um, yeah, no, I do like how Gary. I mean, Ian Wright as well. Ian Wright is basically a football fan at heart, and Ian Wright's background is definitely you know, Ian Wright, I love Ian Wright. Roy Keane, he's a bit divisive, he's a bit brutal, but I like Ian Wright with his viewpoint on how and his enthusiasm he has, um, even at his age in his 50s, his enthusiasm he still has for the sport. Um, so I like Ian Wright. I do like Gary Lineker. Um, Grant Holt has been a breath of fresh air on the FA Cup coverage that the BBC's had. I like Grant Holt because he actually started out in the non-league like Ian Wright. So his enthusiasm for the sport, and he's not long retired. They are very very good. Um, I I I have no problem with Gary Lineker. I've grown up obviously watching the end of his career and watching him on the TV. Grant Holt and Ian Wright are brilliant, brilliant ex-player pundits as well. I really like Dion Dublin as well. The enthusiasm and the energy they bring to breaking down what's happening on the pitch. Bearing in mind, all three of them played in the lower leagues at one point, and also played in the Premier League. Grant Holt, I think, is what you can achieve as a player. He's very well spoken. He is from Cumbria. He's a Cumbrian lad, which is not very often you see someone from Cumbria, you know, um, get to professional sporting levels at the highest level. He did it the hard way. Um, Ian Wright from South London, um, obviously had his issues playing in the non-league, going down a dodgy path, was encouraged to stay away from gangs and crime, and broke the cycle. And he's done great things off the pitch as well. I like seeing. I mean, Ian Wright is just, for me, the fans pundit. He speaks it from a passionate fan point of view, and the sport gave him so much, and he gives back, and he's brilliant. So I'm a massive a massive massive fan of Ian Wright. NBC, yes, they had obviously decided not to renew their NHL TV deal. NBC were heavily criticised with a lot of issues they've had over the last couple of years with some of their presenting team having some off-camera scandals, and getting up to no good. I did hear a lot of complaints about NBC and their Olympics coverage. I didn't watch any of the Olympics this summer. I was not very well at the time anyway. I was having a lot of health issues, and I really, as you would have noticed, I took a long break from the channel doing any content during the months of August and September. I really just Took a long, lengthy break from doing content creation. I just had to look after myself, put myself first. So my health came as a priority um, rather than doing this. I wish I had done this while I was not well. It would have helped, I think, with my mental and physical health recovery, doing something. But I decided to focus on personal issues. Um, Thoughts on the Chelsea postponement request getting denied? That again, with what's happening with the COVID outbreak in the Premier League and the Championship, it's going to cause a lot of fixturing problems in the new year. How they're going to get these games refixtured? It's not just one or two games now; it's multiple. Um, the Christmas festive period is going to be a nightmare. I can see more games getting postponed in all leagues in England and across Europe. I can see with what's happening. The fact that Tottenham and Man United are heavily impacted, Reading as well in the Championship. You've got the FA Cup third round in the first week of the new year, so only a couple of weeks away. The big festive period, there's a lot of games in there. It's going to create scheduling nightmares for the Premier League and the Football League to make sure all these games do get played with what's happening with the World Cup this time next year. The shortened off season we're going to have, the disruption to league schedules next year. Nicotine, the way I cope with idiots. Um, I'm not surprised. The Premier League's got to be very very careful. Um, the, I think Liverpool's injuries massively hampered them last season, and I call it second season syndrome when you win the title for the first time in a long time. Leicester are finding it out this season as well with their FA Cup win last year. They're picking up their form though. I call it second season syndrome. So you win your first title in a long time. Leicester had it after their Premier League win as well. They had a massive dip in form. Blackburn had it when we won the Premier League, massive dip in form. Um, in that regard, I call it the sophomore slump. A lot of people use that term. I call it the second season syndrome. When you have a very, very good season for the first time in a long time, or a good successful spell, you're going to have a bit of a drop off. It's very hard to sustain that. Um, Chelsea, Liverpool, it's difficult. Um, you could say the amount of games that these clubs are now playing with the amount of success they have domestically, whilst also playing in Europe and the cup competitions, it does take a wear and tear um, on squads. And managers are now coming out and more often raising concerns about the fixture congestion. And with Tottenham and Man United having their fixtures postponed and Reading in the Championship, that's going to impact the league and the FA Cup and League Cups when they're going to get these games played. There's going to have to be uh, you know, the FA, the Premier League, and the Football League are going to have some scheduling nightmares. We saw it with the non-league last year, with the National League downwards, and Dover Athletic, for example, having played only 10 games in the season. It cost Torquay the National League title, all the postponements um, in the end, ironically. So it's going to be a fixturing nightmare. It's going to be an absolute fixturing nightmare. I postpone. No, you can't do that. You cannot do that simply because of when the World Cup's taking place. They're already forgoing the winter break that they would have put in this year to get the World Cup played. There's just no real. They've had to move all the international games and condense the qualifying tournament format, rearrange it. I can't see that working. I think we could see a league shutdown if we're not careful. The NHL as well, and the NBA. How in North America we could see league shutdowns again. They want to avoid that as much as possible with the financial impact over the last 2 years. That would cause catastrophic problems when it comes to the Champions League, Europa Conference League, the FA Cup, the League Cup. They want to get these games played. Last season, there were some of the lower league clubs, especially the non-league, hadn't played for a couple of months when they were playing games. It was their first, competitive fixtures they had had. It was a nightmare last year. The massive financial hit that a lot of clubs faced and are still struggling with. Derby County being an example, Reading being another one, having issues with finances off the field. you do that again, you could put a load of clubs out of business completely, which is just not sustainable for the league structure. Uh, they're again, I think they're foregoing their winter break this year to get all the fixtures in, um, all the fixtures in for the World Cup next year. Because the World Cup has been moved to an awkward slot, it has meant that every league is not going with their normal winter break, basically, so they can get all their league fixtures and cup fixtures done to have a shorter off season because the regular season next year is being pushed forward to an earlier start date. It affects the transfer window as well, so they can get the World Cup played when there's that shutdown. It's the only way they can do it because of the World Cup being where it is. The fixturing nightmare the European leagues are facing. I mentioned this earlier in the stream. The fixturing nightmare the European leagues are going to face with COVID as well. Even without COVID, it was going to be a nightmare. We've already seen bad weather affect games across Europe in November, especially in the UK. There's more bad weather possibly due in a couple of weeks. Looking at long range forecasts, that's going to have an impact. If there's heavy wintry, heavy snow, that's going to definitely massively impact the domestic leagues, which is normally the reason why we have winter breaks in mainland Europe and why we now agreed to have winter breaks, obviously, in February. I think in the Premier League, they're forgoing that this year. So you can't shut down the league till February. It's just not financially viable. And you won't, and the player welfare. We saw with the resumption of play, injuries went up because players weren't match fit. And the rescheduling and the chaos with the shortened off seasons had impacts. And now, oh yeah, the FIFA chased the money. The corrupt. We know obviously now we know about the um, the way the World Cup was awarded and how the process worked. Obviously, we now know um, the the fact that they, you know, originally wanted to play it in the height of summer and then it got moved to a winter slot creates its own issues, as we're now seeing. Now, regardless of the COVID pandemic, if let's say bad weather did hit, the fact that the European leagues are forgoing their winter breaks, which even the English leagues have said we're going to have a winter break in February, we were meant to have it. They decided to. In Italy, Spain, Germany, and France, it's not as big as an issue. Why do you think games in Serie A argue? They will be. There will be outbreaks. There will be outbreaks. Trust me on that. It will happen. There's probably better contingency planning in place. The protocols will probably be more strictly enforced as well. So question marks have to be raised about what the protocols they put in place in the Premier League and the Championship and the Football League, for example. Um, I think they are being more strictly enforced. I think clubs are very, very aware that if they breach protocols, they could face heavy fines by their domestic FAs. Um, who knows why it's less of a problem? I think there will be issues with bad weather causing problems in Europe going forward. And I do think the pandemic, as it is, will start impacting the European leagues as well, given time. We're already seeing games getting, with the outbreaks in English football, affecting the European Cup competitions, with games being going to have to be rearranged. Um, uh, we will see what happens. Basically, is what I'm watch this space. Is my opinion on things at the moment. Um, what we're seeing is we're impacted worse. However, we will. I think it will actually ultimately affect what happens on the continent as well. Um, um, Britain and Ireland planning a bid. Yes, that is a well-known fact that they are planning a joint bid. The UK and Ireland, so the expanded Euros. I think they're going to expand the Euros to World Cup size, 32 teams at some point. Tottenham have played 14 league games in over 4 months. So sorry for the Prem this year, but between the international breaks, COVID shutdowns, and work loads, it's been hard. Yes, you know, the way they've handled the international calendar, that it really disrupted the flow for a lot of teams, and that could explain why teams like Leicester, for example, had a slow start. Um, and teams at the bottom of the league also struggling as well to get some momentum going, like Burnley and Newcastle and such, um, and Leeds. But yes, the weather and the pandemic has impacted things. But a lot of that is also to do with the scheduling being put in place because of the World Cup. Um, yeah, I think this is on the. I mean, we'll see how it impacts the FA Cup. I was surprised with the FA Cup second round and first rounds that games took place with the amount of bad weather we had. Um, quite. I mean, you can just see like my notebook. If you watch some of the videos I did, especially the second round and the first round of match reviews, where I mentioned I am surprised this game has taken place. I'm surprised the pitch is holding up. Fans are in the stadium with the amount of heavy rain and heavy snow we've had. Um, the battering we had in November, beginning of December, I'm really surprised that the FA Cup wasn't more overly impacted. Um, I for me, my passion for league football, when I say league football, domestic seasons has waned in recent years. There's a lot of reasons for that. Um, it was very. I think, yeah, the NHL last year, it was very difficult for me to get into it because of all the. I was really into the 2019-2020 season. Then the break happened, the pause. I didn't get back into watching the rest of the restarted playoffs last season. Didn't really get into it at all until the playoff period. This season, been really into it, and now we're seeing teams shut down because of COVID protocols and outbreaks. We could see the NHL shut down and have a fire break and not go to the Olympics and use that break that they are having for the Olympics as a shutdown period. Um, but the NHL has put the Olympic participation in the hands of the NHLPA, and it's to do with the collective bargaining agreement. It's getting down to the wire with the NHL and Olympic participation for the players. In regards to, I think it was now obviously the right decision to delay the Rugby League World Cup. In hindsight, um, the way that was handled, however, at the time, question mark. There was a fair bit of frustration there. Um, you know, but in hindsight, now with what's happening with this new variant, it was the right decision. Um, However, the way it was handled at the time, well, it could have been handled better. Um, yeah, well, we'll see what happens with the World Championships in May, whether they are impacted with what's going on right now. Um, I personally think they go ahead. It was a decent tournament this year, just gone, and in 2019 it was a decent tournament as well. I really enjoyed it. I watched a fair few games. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. Obviously, 2020 was 2020, and I was actually planning to go to the games in Switzerland back in 2019. I was planning to get my passport, go with a couple of mates, and go over to watch the games in Switzerland. Obviously, what's obviously happened has happened. Um, and the Swiss have obviously lost their right to host that particular one because it rotates around the top level. Um, but again, it'll roll around again in May, and it'll be thoroughly enjoyable to watch. I have no doubt. Um, but it does clash with the Stanley Cup playoffs, so it'll be very interesting to see with this current rising cases in the NHL, the tightening of protocols, teams being shut down. They want to still go to the Olympics. It's it's getting again the Premier League cancelling games. Tottenham and Man United are heavily impacted. I'm going to actually have a quick look up on what's happening. I don't think the league fully shuts down personally at this point. However, I wouldn't be surprised. We managed to get through last season. So and we managed to get through the restart. So in my opinion, it's a difficult one. But if cases continue to rise and teams have these shutdowns in both the Premier League and the Football League, we could see a temporary shutdown. In the women's game is going ahead. Scottish League Cup final, Hibs Celtic in the build-up. You're right. Okay, so Chelsea say a request to postpone today's game against Wolves was rejected. Right, let's have a look at. Let's have a look at. Let's get back to football. All right, let's have a look. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at the postponements. Right, I'll tell you. Oh, this is interesting. So this is interesting. Mikel Arteta, this is yesterday evening, wants fairness after the Premier League's COVID meeting. They did have an emergency meeting. So this is the article on the BBC website, which was yesterday. Arsenal boss Mikel Arteta says he wants everyone to play under the same rules after Monday's Premier League meeting to discuss the COVID pandemic. 6 of this weekend's 10 games have been postponed, and only one game took place yesterday, which was Arsenal's 4-1 win over Leeds. There's another meeting on Monday, so tomorrow, where all 20 top flight clubs are discussing options. But Arteta stated this. He is quoted as saying they have to come forward and explain what we are to expect from them. And bear in mind, Arteta's had COVID as well. Remember that. If everyone is healthy and the authorities think we have to carry on, we will. We follow the guidance. If they say play as you can, we will play as we can. We want to all play under the same rules and under the same way. Whatever they decide, it is better for the fairness of the competition. Meanwhile, Premier League Chief Executive Richard Masters has written to clubs urging players to get the vaccine and stressed the importance of league completing the season. The EFL, Rick Parry, has said there are no plans to pause the Football League from the Championship to League Two because of COVID-19, despite 19 games being postponed now this weekend. Reading obviously being shut down completely. The decision to cancel 5 league games was made on Friday, but the announcement that Villa Burnley was called off was only made 2.5 hours. It's the second time Burnley's had a game called off literally hours before kick-off time at 3 o'clock. Former Liverpool midfielder Danny Murphy said on BBC Radio 5 Live, it's a disastrous situation for some of the supporters. I feel for them. There has got to be some logic around the Premier League and trusting the clubs to make the phone call early and say this game's got no chance. There has to be some clarity from the Premier League. It sounds ridiculous for a £1 billion organisation such as the EPL not to be given transparent messages on what the criteria is, what are the rules. As well as the official Premier League clubs meeting, managers and captains are also due to hold their own meetings. More than half this weekend's English Football League games were called off too, 19 out of 36. But all 4 Scottish Premiership matches went ahead. Of course, there's a Scottish Cup final, obviously, today. BBC senior football reporter Ian Dennis said there are greater concerns for the paying travelling supporter. The Villa Burnley postponement came after new information was provided by Villa, but it begs the question whether that information could have been provided any sooner. Does there need to be an earlier cut-off point? Absolutely. You cannot call a game off, especially when you've fans travel down from Lancashire. That's a good 3-hour travel. Other Premier League managers have differing thoughts on the issue of whether to suspend football, as happened back in March 2020 at the start of the pandemic. Brentford boss Thomas Frank thinks this weekend's Premier League games and the EFL Cup ties next week should have been postponed so teams could break the chain of infection by Boxing Day. I think that is fair. Liverpool boss Jurgen Klopp says he does not see the 100% benefit of stopping the league because they would have to find space to play several games at a later date, which is also a concern with the World Cup, as I've mentioned, with the fixturing being a nightmare. There are only 2 completely free midweeks in the rest of the season. And they were both set aside for potential cup matches, causing league games to be postponed. Newcastle manager Eddie Howe has said he does not think games should go ahead while so many are getting called off. Dennis added, clubs with different opinions need to try and find a solution, and they need to try and find some common ground going forward. There isn't a great deal of wiggle room regarding trying to fit in all these games into the schedule with the World Cup as well, obviously affecting scheduling this season and next season. There's a lot to try and get through from a logistical point of view, a welfare point of view regarding players and staff who work at various clubs, and consideration for the supporters. The meeting on Monday will not purely be about potential break and matches being called off. Rearranging the games that have already been postponed is also on the agenda. Delaying the end of the season would cause huge logistical problems. World Cup. The Nations League is due to start the 4th of June with 4 games for each European nation that month, and next season is meant to start with a week earlier to fit in the Winter World Cup in Qatar. So I've already mentioned, that previously in the live stream. I don't know. I honestly don't know. Quite quite honestly, what's going to happen. Um, I do think, yeah, players urged to get the COVID vaccine by Premier League and government. Everton Leicester's been postponed today. That goes on to all the games postponed yesterday. Three games are going ahead today. Two of them kick off in 15 minutes. It's Newcastle City, Man City, Wolves, Chelsea. They're 2 o'clock kickoffs. Tottenham Liverpool's a 4:30 kickoff. Tottenham obviously having their COVID outbreak. That's going to be interesting. I will get to what obviously has been brought up there. I was just reading through that article. Um, let's have a look. Anything else coming up? I wasn't aware that there was that many games being postponed yesterday. Again, I don't really follow the football league. I was aware of clubs having outbreaks. I was also aware of the record-breaking test figures that we had for this last week, which broke the record of last year during the winter pandemic we had. Um, uh, Project Restart 2, we'll have to see what happens. I mean, only have a look at when the FA Cup ties are played. First week of January, I think. The first weekend in January is when the FA Cup third round. So, obviously, we only had the one FA Cup replay in the second round, which was played on Wednesday, which I did a match review of between Barrow and Ipswich. Yeah, so there's a lot of. Look at that. Look at that. If I can get the camera, that's the FA Cup third round draw, right? Look how many fixtures you've got. The Championship and Premier League clubs joining the League One, League Two, and non-league clubs that have made it through to the third round. That is really important. So you've got that in the first week of January. Remember that. Right, let me get back to my notes. What else we got? There was the second round matches. I've got all the second round matches there. There's some first round matches that some first round matches as well. There was a couple of replays in there. So the FA Cup is going to be impacted. I have no doubt. Look how many fixtures there are. I had to go to a second column. So there's only 2 midweek games or slots available because they're anticipating the FA Cup and League Cup, Champions League, Europa League, etc. When teams are in those competitions to impact regular league season. Plus, we've had the weather disruptions as well. About a month ago, with the 3 weeks ago, with the snow and rain and winter storms we've had. I don't know. If they do decide to shut down, it creates massive problems. Massive problems. The fact that half the Football League fixtures this weekend have also been called off is telling. Very telling. Reading, Man United and Tottenham. Man United and Tottenham are now back to Tottenham obviously meant to be playing today. I wouldn't say it's Project Restart 2 at this point. However, we have to look at the protocols that the FA have agreed with the Premier League and the Football League and put in place and how strictly clubs are following them. Because we are seeing less problems on the continent, although I can see in mainland Europe also the impacts being felt. As if we suspend the regular seasons, what does that happen? What does that mean for the English sides in the Champions League, Europa League, and Europa Conference League? What happens then? What also happens when with the FA Cup and League Cup? It's not just a Premier League problem. I think all 92 Football League clubs, so not just the Premier League clubs, all 92 clubs need to have an emergency general meeting. Not just the Premier League. I think it needs to be the whole Football League structure from Premier League down to League Two. Look what happened to the National League and below last season and the season before, the chaos there where they didn't resume. The money issues this time last year, we were having to debate, about the payment plan and bailing and supporting the lower leagues. We cannot go back to having a Dover Athletic situation where they have so many games in hand and they can't play them all. They just cannot physically complete the season. We cannot get to that situation. Because of the amount of money in the Football League and the Premier League, I don't think we get to that situation whereby there's no promotion relegation. That could be an outcome. That could honestly be an outcome, which is what we want to avoid. We nearly got to that stage in 2020 with the resumption of play, where they were like null and void the season. With there were big calls to null and void the season and keep and restart the following season with no points, go from there, no promotion, relegation throughout the entire football pyramid. Um, Now, you could argue the pros and cons of that to death. Um, um, is it depressing? Well, you've got to look at the players and the clubs not really sticking to keeping safe. Players not vaccinating, clubs not enforcing, stricter protocols, being too lax in their protocols. But then again, we've seen so many players break the COVID restrictions when we had lockdowns and tier systems. I mean, Kyle Walker springs to mind straight away. Jack Grealish during the first lockdown in 2020, going to Moses Keane. I could name a whole host of players who breached the initial lockdown in 2020. Kyle Walker breached lockdowns multiple times. Um, you know, so we're relying on the players behaving as well, and they haven't in the past. So again, there needs to be stricter punishments for players who breach and clubs who breach the COVID protocols. Player misbehaviour is too many players get away with it. There needs to be a point where enough is enough, because from what I am seeing, last season and the season before, players just didn't follow the instructions at all. Um, and for me, there needs to be stronger punishments for COVID breaches, in my opinion, because it risks derailing what was Project Restart. Now, there are obviously going to be some clubs that are in a strong position than others that will say carry on, or whatever. Other clubs be like, please suspend, please suspend. So when you've got clubs like Newcastle and Leeds really at the wrong end of the table, they're going to be pushing very strongly for a suspension in play. Same with Norwich, same with Burnley. They're going to be quite happy to go, yeah, please shut the season down. It allows for them to stop and reset and everything. But the festive period, I mean, the fixture congestion from about now through to the first week of the new year with the FA Cup third round is ridiculous. And with teams like Tottenham, Man United having so many games postponed, including domestically and in Europe, it's going to be a nightmare rescheduling that. We could see teams going, well, we'll take the forfeit. That could be a way around it. Is teams go, right, we'll take the forfeit, then we'll take the 2-0 loss, which counts against them, just so they can get the season completed. But then that begs the question how that impacts the promotion and relegation battles in the Football League, the Premier League, the non-league. We cannot end up in a situation, however, like Dover Athletic ended up in last season, where they could not complete the season. They were basically stripped of all their points and had to start this season on negative points. Regardless if they're a professional club or not, they just could not overcome the amount of games they had in hand. It cost Torquay the title as well, ironically, the constant issues with the National League. And the financial hit that the non-league clubs faced, and the lower leagues as well, with League One and League Two, basically screaming out, "We need a salary cap now. We cannot sustain financial losses in the short to medium term." There's a lot on the table. I think just the Premier League alone having a meeting is ridiculous. I think all 92 professional league clubs in the top floor flights need to have an emergency general meeting. The Football League and Premier League and the FA need to get together and have an emergency general meeting of club owners, managers, and players. So the PFA need to really have a full meeting with all members. The 92 top 4 division clubs from League Two to the Premier League need to have a meeting, because they're all 4 leagues are obviously still involved with the FA Cup, and the top 2 divisions, I think, with the League Cup as well. You've got the FA Trophy as well for the lower level clubs. That's still an active concern. So you've got these cup games that need to be played alongside regular. They all need to be around the table. You can't be us and them. This is where we had problems in the last 2 years. Football governance. I mean, then the PFA needs to really tell its members you need to follow the protocols, because if you don't, we can't back you up when it comes to you getting suspended and fined by your club or by the league. The FA, the Premier League, and the EFL have been very, very weak in their punishment of players and clubs that breach the protocols. There needs to be suspensions. There needs to be fines. They will very, very quickly go, "We'll behave." Um, but it, for newer fans to English football, like Dan here, who's an American, it does suck when you're trying to get into a new sport or a new league and you're seeing all these problems and the divisiveness and the arguments and the breakdown in talks and we had this in 2020. I covered it. The PFA didn't cover themselves in glory. The Premier League and Football League didn't cover themselves in glory. The FA didn't. It was really poor leadership from the organisations that are meant to, lead the game. It was down to individual clubs and player squads to work out their salary deferrals, which is ridiculous. Um, the player behaviour during lockdown was ridiculous, and I have no sympathy for the playing group at this point. The clubs, their the off-field discipline was not good enough, and now we're in a situation again where we are facing the possibility of a league shutdown. Ice hockey in this country as well has been impacted. There's been games called off because of COVID. I follow on British ice hockey, the Elite League and the National League. Games are starting to get called off. In Wales, they're going to basically stop people going into enclosed nightclubs. So the Cardiff Devils are going to be playing in front of an empty arena from Boxing Day, I believe. So there's already, there's already concerns, and Scotland as well are considering shutting down nightclubs and pubs and indoor arenas. Again, that affects the Elite League and ice hockey. It will affect football. It will affect rugby union. You know, so I don't think we're far off another shutdown. Personally, if things are going on as they are, uh, it's a wait and see on this. They can't afford to shut down with the World Cup coming up. Um, and with the nightmare that fixturing is. If the English league shuts down, that's going to impact the European competitions cup wise. When will the English teams be allowed to play in Europe? Same with Scotland if they decide there's no plans at the moment to shut down the Scottish game. But again, you have to bear that in mind. Um, how will that will screw up, you know, the knockout stages of the Champions League, Europa League, and Europa Conference League, and that's a lot of money as well to some of the smaller clubs that are playing in those competitions. That's a lot of money. It will impact the European leagues. Um, if there's positive test results and there's shutdowns, it will start impacting the European leagues. I have no doubt. We've already seen the rugby union with the four European teams getting stuck in South Africa, affecting the domestic and European cups in Europe in rugby union, with the Welsh, Irish, and Italian teams getting stuck in South Africa. So there's definitely it's while this new strain of the virus is less dangerous, um, until the science can understand it, I'd rather go with caution than without. However, with the way governments across Europe have been acting, and high-ranking officials in those governments have been acting, and the pushback from the public, it's going to be a very tricky situation to handle. Would you rather win the FA Cup or the League Cup and a top four spot? Try and win as many trophies as possible. Because if you win the FA Cup and League Cup, it's already an automatic qualification for Europe anyway. So if you're an average mid-table team, go on a cup run. It can prove more beneficial than trying to, battle for league position sometimes. And those cup runs bring extra income into your bank account with playing extra fixtures. So try and go for cup wins if you can. But in regards to cancelling games and important meetings, there doesn't seem to be a universal directive from all the leagues, because the Football League is going down a different path to the Premier League. I think all 92 top four division clubs should have an extraordinary general meeting where the Football League, Premier League, all members meet. They don't seem to want to do that. They want to keep, the 72 Football League clubs, the 20 Premier League clubs, the PFA all in separate meetings. They need to be all around the table via Zoom meetings immediately. Stop with the we're more important than them. We'll have us and them kind of thing. If if the Football League clubs and the Premier League clubs are all involved in the same cup competitions, which they are in the FA Cup and League Cup, and you got the FA Trophy and the FA Vase for the non-league and lower leagues as well. Get them all round the table. Get them all round the table. Get the chief exec of the National League and the non-league leagues around the table via Zoom. Football League. Get them all round the table. You can do it by Zoom. It is vitally important that meetings like that happen. They're choosing not to do it. They're being a bit different. It makes no sense. Um, it really doesn't make any sense. Like, it is concerning what's happened in the last 48 hours. What's the topic today? Everything, apparently. It, we're having look, the NBA and the NHL are having the same conversations in North America about COVID protocols and shutdowns. Um, um, so I did ask, the reverse retro. Some of them were shockingly poor. The Islanders, what was that? Um, please. Uh, some of them were pretty cool. They did make up for a lot of lost revenue. It did help the NHL. I can see more alternate jerseys via a variety of leagues doing it. I can. Um, we already see in other leagues they have like Indigenous round jerseys. The women's round jerseys. Women like the NRL, for example, has Indigenous round and women's round jerseys, which are different. Um, I can see other leagues and other sports doing that, make like third alternates, fourth alternates, retro designs. I can see that being a thing, but that's going to be purely a cash grab. Um, and I'm not overly keen on some of this pure cash grab, thinking, especially when you and I are struggling economically with rising prices and wages not keeping up. Um, Carlisle United reducing capacity. They're not the first team to go. We're going to have reduced capacity. Bearing in mind, a lot of Carlisle fans actually are from Scotland, and under Scottish rules, that you know, it, Carlisle is in a very difficult position because a fair proportion of their fan base do actually live across the border in Gretna. All the old Gretna fans now support Carlisle, basically. Once Gretna went out of business, so they have a lot of. I think it is right for them to reduce capacity before the government forces them to do so. They're going to have to. I think all football stadiums in England will have reduced capacity in the new year. I can see it happening. I think Carlisle are looking at in the community as well. That's a club-based decision. I think, as I say, the EFL and Premier League need to get around the table together. All 92 top four divisions, the clubs in the top four divisions need to get around the table immediately and have an emergency general meeting. Um, I think it's the right decision by Carlisle United. Absolutely, they're putting their fans' health first. I think it's the right decision. While I would like to see full capacities, look at the situation. I think Carlisle United reducing their capacity is the right decision. Whether we as people think it's the right decision, they're willing to take an economic hit to protect their fans. And they're in a they play in the lower levels of the English game. They're not a lot of money. They are willing to take the financial hit, but lead the way. Other clubs, I think, should follow suit. I think Carlisle United, much like Birmingham City being the first club to announce that their playing squad agreed to wage reductions in 2020, why is it that individual clubs are trying to actually be proactive and do the right thing, whereas the league organisations in the EFL and Premier League aren't? Carlisle United, I can see all stadiums doing it. I can see the bigger clubs doing it as well with the bigger stadiums. I think it's a very correct and brave decision to take financially. No, I can see reduced capacities to 50% or 60% capacity. I can see that happening to allow a bit more spacing out. I can see 50% capacity being a thing. I think Carlisle United doing what they've done, it's a brave decision. Very brave decision from Carlisle, considering they've had games impacted by the weather. and it's going to impact their revenue streams. It's a very brave decision, but it's the right decision. It's a very proactive decision. But it shouldn't be on individual clubs to lead the way. It should be on the Football League and the Premier League liaising with government, and also having getting around the table together, because you've got the FA Cup third round and the League Cup later stages where clubs from all the league pyramid play against each other. I think you need to have uh, as a former ref. Well, look, I played at youth level. I didn't play professionally. I will say that. It was more youth level and amateur. I was more anxious when I was at school rather than when I was playing rugby in my 20s. Um, I got more anxious, yeah, at school. But I was being bullied a lot at school. Sport was one of the few things I enjoyed, and I used to get nervous. Yes, I did used to. I used to get nervous, but as I got a little bit older, um, you know, my anxiety. When I actually just preferred, you know, preferred playing at school. As I got older, I learned that it wasn't as bad. Like, I was more nervous about not playing well, getting hurt. But then when I actually enjoyed the physical contact of playing rugby and all that, it went away. I liked getting stuck in, and I didn't mind getting bumps and bruises. Once I got over that initial fear of getting injured and getting hurt when I was like 11, 12 years old, and then just throwing myself headfirst into things, I felt things went better. The anxiety disappeared. It was more. I was more nervous about, yeah, getting hurt, um, not playing very well, um, not enjoying it. But once actually I started getting rolling my sleeves up and getting dirty, I actually just enjoyed it. It took a little while. I didn't enjoy it at first, but as I got older, I enjoyed it more, because I found it as a good outlet for me. I did struggle at school, not reading and writing and all that, and doing the exams. I struggled by I got bullied a lot at school, and I found sport was a good outlet for me. So as I got older, I enjoyed that outlet more. Um, and then when I got a bit older, I decided, you know what, I'm not that good at it, really. Let's be honest. Rugby was the only sport that I really, really enjoyed playing at school. And as I got older, yeah, I enjoyed it to a certain degree. But then apart from rugby, I didn't really enjoy playing other sports apart from cricket. Football, I was more of a goalkeeper anyway. I didn't enjoy playing football at school. Um, um, I used it as an outlet for my frustrations that I was feeling, and the isolation I was feeling at school. I used it as an outlet, and then after leaving school, I didn't look back really. Um, my anxiety disappeared. Um, but I had other issues outside when I was in my teens and 20s that I still struggle with now. Um, but once I got over the fear of getting hurt, and you know, you know, and once I got stuck in and got used to the physicality of it, I enjoyed it because I could actually hurt the kids that were bullying me by, yeah, doing a few of the dark arts in the ruck and the maul and tackle area. And once I got some of the kids' respect for like some of the tackles I would put in, and the lack of fear that I had going into contact, they quite quickly left me alone after that. Ironically, I actually earned their respect, and they realised that I actually could handle myself. Um, and yeah, I had a lot of aggression that I had to get out. Um, and once I channeled that aggression and that energy into playing, my coach was brilliant. His words to me were, "You are the most improved sportsman we've seen over the last couple of years, whether." But he said to me this, Mr. Liddell was his name, absolute nutter, little angry little man, and he says, "I don't care if the bastard's got the ball or not. You hit the bastard." So he didn't care if the player had possession or not. He wanted me just to put the shoulder through and nail him. Even if the tackle was late, just commit to it and leave your mark on the opposition player because then he knows you've got his number. And uh, for the last game I played for my first school, I was made captain as well, which was quite nice. I was made captain for the last game we played as well. Um, oh no, trust me, I used to fight in school as well. I used to have like kids picking me all the time, and I used to get quite. I had a bit of a reactionary temper on me, and once I put that reactionary temper into playing rugby, Jesus Christ, because that was the main sport at school, they very quickly left me the hell alone. Because not only was like I didn't like these guys, what I was doing to the opposition was generally terrifying because I was taking on some quite bigger lads and not backing down from some quite sizable chaps coming down my channel. And I would tackle all day. And I wasn't the best winger out there that we had, but I would tackle all day and I would throw myself head first into tackles and I would definitely from kickoffs always target the receiver. I would just go hell for leather for the guy receiving the ball, and just fly into them. I didn't score many tries, but I definitely left me mark on a few people. Um, um, I got my head stamped on a few times. I had my nose broken a few times in game. I had arms and legs split open. But yeah, I definitely didn't mind the dirty side of it. And then by the end of my first school, the front row that I used to play second row for a little bit because I was actually quite tall for my year, and then they had an injury on the wing, and my coach was like, "I want to move you to the wing because you've got that physicality and the aggression, but I want to move you to the wing because well you you're bigger than the winger we had, and you're more aggressive and more angry than the winger we had, and you don't mind." Um, well, hitting people very hard, um, and um, and so I ended up on the wing, which suited me because I still got involved in the rough and tumble stuff. I didn't. I was one of the few wingers that actually was happy to get involved in the rough and tumble stuff um, at school. Most wingers don't like getting dirty. I love throwing myself headfirst into bigger blokes because the bigger blokes generally are fatter and they're generally quite nice to put your shoulder into because they're fat and they're cuddly. So when you fall over, you've got something nice and soft to land on. I'm a bit lean and bony, so getting a shoulder from me actually does not. It's not quite comfortable getting that up your ribs. And I've got decent footwork. Um, but yeah, I enjoyed. I definitely enjoyed. Yeah, I did enjoy playing second row. I did enjoy playing number eight and flanker for a little bit. But then midway through that season, because we played over 2 terms, it wasn't just over one, what you call a semester, it's over 2 terms. So we played half the winter term was rugby, and then the whole Easter term was rugby as well. So the spring, second half of winter, beginning of spring. And the first, I think, 5 6 games, I was second row, forward number eight. And then my coach was like, "No, I'm putting you on the wing. We're conceding too many tries on the wing, and you tackle everything that you don't miss tackles. You throw yourself into every single challenge." And yeah, I ended up on the wing, and we played this other team when I was in the forward pack, and they saw me on the wing, and they thought I would be a slow lumbering second row, and I wasn't, and so they tried to try and do me for pace, and not a single try. Not They didn't score a single try down my channel on the left wing all day. And this was a school we hated, and they had duffed us up playing football, and they had beaten us. in the first game we played, and they put me on the wing. And we lost the game, but I tell you now, they didn't score a single point down my left-hand wing channel at all. Um, and I was doing a lot of defending that day. They were a far better side. I was doing a lot of defending, and I never missed a tackle. I think I must have made about 25, 30 tackles in that game. They just kept coming down my channel, and I kept like tackling them and putting them down. It was kind of fun. It was good tackling practice. I only touched the ball in my hands running twice, but I was tackling a lot. I was exhausted by the end of that game. I was only like 13 at the time, 14 years old. I think I was 13. I tackled all day. Um, and I tackled myself into the ground. So when I actually had the ball in my hands, I was too tired to run and try and beat the defender. I try to be best. I try to be best. But my job, my coach told me my job was literally, I want you to, and this was the first time I played on the wing. My coach told me, your job, literally, we're going to probably lose this game, but your job is to shut down their right winger and their outside centre. I want you to tackle all day. That is your job. If you get the ball, do something with it. Obviously, present the ball correctly, go into contact correctly, make sure you look after the ball, don't knock it on. But your job is to shut down the outside centre and the right winger. And I did that. So I was happy. I was happy with what I did, what I was told to do. Everyone else crap, but I did my job. That was the important thing. I did my job, and I absolutely tackled myself into. I think I had a fractured eye socket, and this is 20 years ago. So yeah, 20 odd years ago. Obviously, a bit of a black eye was a badge of honour. Now it's you've broken your eye socket. So I think I actually damaged my orbital bone. I broke my nose. I know that much because I couldn't see out my left eye. My cheek was in agony. I had a nice cut around the back of my ear where someone stamped on my head, just behind my ear. There's a bit of claret coming down the side of my head. Um, I think I dislocated my thumb, so they strapped up my wrist, and they just kept running at me, and I kept tackling them. And it was kind of like you're trying this constantly. You might want to change. And then they had a rolling ball line out, and I sort of, as it was in the act of scoring, I could collapse it, and I just collapsed it in such a way that I was underneath the ball, and I kind of was sat on by about 15 people, which was fun. But if you want someone just to tackle all day and doesn't mind taking on the contact from the bigger guy, I mean, man. Uh, would I be playing rugby now? No, my body is a bit broken. And yes, the 1970s phone, they got their sideburns back and it all shaved off, but the hair is still long. Uh, as I say, my hair is the mullet. This is not the longest I've had my hair. I can get it in a ponytail now, but I choose not to. But we might ponytail it in the new year. I'm going to grow it until Easter. I think I might grow it for 2 years. It's been a year and a half since I've had a haircut. I might try and grow it for a couple of years and see how long I can get it by this August. Might be interesting. So yeah, I've not had a haircut since the second week of August 2020. Not been to the barbers, so yeah. Did I donate my sideburns to the 1970s Dutch side? I wish I had. I wish I had. Neeskin's got his sideburns back. They played some real sexy football. Of course, you can't stamp in rugby union anymore. They've changed the rules because that was the ruck clear out. That was the clear out. That has changed. So the rules have changed in that area. So now you see a lot of players just lying in the ruck and the maul, getting in the way. Back in the 90s and the early 2000s, yeah, you'll get stamped and you would very quickly roll out of the way. That's why when you tackle, you roll quickly as possible. If you're not able to get to your feet, you roll out of the way. That was something I learned very, very quickly was, yeah, getting stamped on by my own team in the ruck. My own team going over me in the ruck clear out was enough for me to go, I want to get out of here. But I was always told to present the ball as quickly as possible and as cleanly as possible, and to turn your body and to basically protect it like an egg, and get in the fetal position. You very, very quickly found that your arms and your knees and getting into the egg position, as I call it, was very important. Protect your head, protect it, and place the ball away, and then just get into the fetal position. But Yeah, I've still got scars on my arms and my head and my back and all over my body where I've been stabbed with studs. Um, wouldn't change it for the world. I really enjoyed that. Really enjoyed the getting dirty. You know, um, I wouldn't change my school rugby experience for the world. I really wouldn't. And there were some lads I played with who ended up playing at the Olympics in the sevens and for England and Scotland. Some of the lads I went to school with, the Evans brothers, I went to school with, they ended up playing for Scotland. Christian Lewis Pratt ended up playing sevens for England. Max Laheath is still playing now professionally. So yeah, have I ever thrown? Yes, I have thrown American football. I have also punted in American football. They're not nice to kick. I tell you that they're horrible to kick. But yes, I have thrown in American football. Um, it's an interesting ball in its shape, but I played Aussie rules, play rugby league, play rugby union. I have done a little bit of touch American football down the park. When you throw it, it is a certain technique to really get it to spin and get distance and good flight on it. Um, it the way it rotates is different to a rugby ball or an AFL ball. The rotation on it when you are a punter, for example, as I'm a very good kicker from hand, playing rugby league, rugby union, and AFL are Aussie rules. Kicking is one of my strengths. The way the ball feels off the foot and the way it rotates is different because the way it's constructed and the materials used to construct a modern American football. So when you're putting your foot through it and when you want to do a rotation, it's interesting. I have a lot of respect for NFL and CFL punters, basically the kickers. When you're doing a punt clearance or you're kicking, obviously for the posts, I've got a lot of respect because the way the ball is slightly shaped with that rough feel on the outside, the stitching on that one side, it does affect how the ball rotates when you're kicking from hand. So when they elect to punt downfield and you've got the kicking unit out, I have a lot of respect for the punters. I do. Oh yeah, when you get a spiral pass, even in rugby union, it's much better than a pop pass for catching it because the way it just rotates into the bread basket. Um, when the receiver for the spiral gets it, it is a feeling when you're the receiver as well, catching it on the run into the breadbasket, watching it in and just catching it. It is a feeling when you're the receiver as well. I've caught American football. It's a different. It's not as nice catching as I prefer catching a rugby ball or an AFL ball. It's a much nicer feeling. It's the way the balls are constructed, the grip on them. There's a reason why the NFL catchers wear gloves. It's not a nice. I don't think it's a nicer ball to catch. Um, but I have a lot of respect for the quarterback in their throwing arm. I do have a lot of respect for the power and the force and the accuracy they have to get behind it. Even an average NFL quarterback, they still to get a 30, 40-yard pass accurately, even longer, the Hail Mary, which could be 60-yard pass accurately, is ridiculous. Um, you have to have a lot of strength in your throwing arm and a good balance as well to move and then launch it. It's a good technique to getting it a nice, good, accurate throw. So in that regard, it is a unique feeling when you do release the ball. It does take a lot of abuse on your shoulder, your elbow, and your wrist, um, which is completely different to rugby league, rugby union. AFL, you have to have the punch pass. So you hold the ball and you punch it out like your fist has been made like this kind of fist, where you have to knock it out like that. You can't pass it. But kicking, um, the different styles of the way that you can do bombs, spirals, torpedoes, up and unders, Gary Owens, uh, long clearances with the ball spins awkwardly. When I try and kick to clear, I try and make it as awkward as possible for the receiving player on the opposition team to catch it. Um, That's what I try and do. Um, so when I was playing rugby, when I was doing a clearing kick, I would try and make it as awkward as possible for the opposition player who's going to be the one under the ball to try and catch it. And therefore, when you play your other teammates on the side, when they're chasing the kick, if it's going to be very awkward for the catcher, you want him to knock it on so you get a scrum. But if he knocks it backwards, you can then put pressure on players around him to pick up the ball, and then you gain further territory. Kicking for touch is a nightmare. I prefer just to leather it downfield and make it as awkward as possible for that poor sod to catch it. There was one thing I had a very good, capable boot. I am a very good right-footed kicker. I can leather it quite a distance on a good day. But kicking from hand is a skill in itself. And in rugby league and in rugby union, it's I think an underrated skill. If you get your spiral kicks, torpedoes, the Gary Owen up and under, you've got to get a lot of height on that, and it's got to come down. You don't get a lot of distance with a Gary Owen, but when you get a long distance clearing kick with a good spiral, what I used to do was try and scramble the spiral where I have the ball at a weird angle and then just put your foot through it and then it rotates weird in the air. And if it's a crosswind, it's a nightmare for that poor defending fullback, winger, centre, maybe a loose forward to try and position themselves when the ball's all over the place. They've got to look at the ball, then look at the opposition. And you want them to look at the opposition, lose the flight of the ball, and then get smashed. Um, Baseball, I treat it like cricket. I know the science behind launching a baseball. Your shoulder is wrecked. This is why when you notice in cricket, fast bowlers have a lot of injuries in the shoulder and elbow because of the force they're putting through and a lot of side strains. Trust me, look at the injuries for fast bowlers in cricket. You'll be wincing with the science that goes behind the action there. And if you want to see a cricket player bowl his technique like a baseball throw, Lasith Malinga or Sean Tate, the slingers, their arms are out here, but they're straight. You've got to have a straight arm. And his rotation's like his head's facing away and he's launching it and he's twisting his body and he's still bowling at 90 mile an hour average every over, every ball. Because he's got to get the bounce on the pitch in such a way that it's still within the wicket, so it's not a wide. And Sean Tate was a poor man's Lasith Malinga. There you go. There's a little bit of cricketing knowledge. And they're the two fastest bowlers consistently for average speed and highest speed clock. Sean Tate's clocked nearly 98, 99, 100 mile an hour. And you're bowling long spells, so you might be bowling 20, 30 over spells in Test cricket. The abuse your body takes. And Lasith Malinga is not a tall man, but Sean Tate is. So when their action, absolutely brutal action. But yeah, baseball is a baseball pitcher brutal on the body. I do know the science behind it. It's mad what they put their bodies through. The ligaments, the joints, that rotation in your shoulder, and when you're rotating like that, you've got to rotate through your shoulder, through your rotary, and your pec. Your pec gets torn. A lot of different pitches. Well, you'll have the practice pitches. So when you watch Test or one day cricket, you'll see the main wicket, and then you'll see other wickets in what they call the cricket pitch section, and then you've got the outfield. You'll see the practice ones where they do the practice bowling, where they put the temporary nets up. The bowler will come up and do some practice. The batsman will do his practice, batting. They're not used on the main day. And the main pitch is the one in the middle, and the surface is interesting because each ground has different climatic conditions, different weather conditions, atmosphere, so altitude. Some of the South African test grounds are at altitude, so the air is thinner. Same with Pakistan and India. You have some altitude pitches where you're higher up. And so that affects how the ball moves in the air with off swing, in swing, out swingers. If you've got a scrambled seam, I prefer watching fast bowlers go at it than spin bowlers personally. But then you've got leg breakers, you've got leg spinners, right arm spinners, medium pace, wrist spin. When you spin the ball, it's how you grip the seam. Some fast bowlers will actually scramble the seam like across like that, which is insane. A scramble seam is a pain in the arse, especially if they're deciding to bowl a Yorker or a good medium to short length bouncer and they want a scrambled seam. You do not want to bat against that. If you've got a bowler who can actually bowl with the seam, so let's say that's the cricket, let's say your fingers are like that, and that's your seam. Your seam is normally held at a slight angle or just like that, or just like that. If you want to hold the ball like that and grip the seam, Jesus Christ, the bounce you get, how weird it is, it will skew all over the place. And if you're a batsman trying to figure out your line and length to drive through or hook the ball, reverse sweep, or however you want to do an AB de Villiers on it, and you've got a fast bowler coming in between 70, which is me class is medium pace now, to 95 mile an hour, and he can adjust his speed as well, where they might bowl consistently at 80 mile an hour, 85, so slow, fast paced, fast medium, and then they bowl at 90 mile an hour, scrambled seam. Jesus Christ, you're caught off guard. It may skid along the ground, have a low bounce. You're expecting it to bounce up here, and it's down there. Or you're expecting he's bowling low bounce, so there's not a lot of bounce in the pitch, and suddenly out of nowhere you've got a bouncer that springs off the pitch, and you've been working out this bowler, and he mixes up his seam, and he rolls his thumb over it a little bit, and you've just got an almost unplayable ball. I prefer watching the fast bowlers going at it with the batsman because that's a better battle. Spin bowlers are just can be so easy to read sometimes. You just carve them out the ground, as Leach found in the last Ashes test where he was hit all over the place and went for big runs because it was the wrong conditions to bowl a spinner. You know, um, the the scariest pitches I think are the subcontinental ones in India and Pakistan, Bangladesh. Um, they're the worst pitches I think as a batsman. Brilliant for fast bowlers. Um, they are and spinners. They are the worst for batsmen. Um, the West Indian pitches are very conducive to fast bowling as well. So if you're playing a Test series against the West Indies in the West Indies, God, it doesn't matter how bad the West Indies are. Their fast bowlers will have fun because their pitches are just designed to scare the shit out of batsmen. Um, you're going to have balls coming at you at about 85 to 95 mile an hour from a fast bowler all day. And yeah, you don't want to get hit on the ribs with one of them. You don't want to get hit on the hand with one of them, or the base of your toe, your foot. Yeah, that can break your foot. That can break your wrist. I've seen. I forget who the New Zealand player had all his teeth knocked out, and that was with the helmet, and his helmet buckled inwards and broke. He lost all his teeth. All his teeth just fired out. I think it was on a Stuart Broad bouncer. It skipped off the pitch, um, and it hit him square there, and you just saw the helmet guard buckle into his face, and all his teeth. Where he was picking up his chiclets, as they're called, he was picking up his teeth, his tic tacs, and he had to have reconstructive surgery to his jaw. Yeah, yeah. I mean, baseball is what it is with the pitcher's mound and the batting crease. And the bases and the outfield is obviously it's evolved as its own sport. Uh, and I would say to any baseball player, batter, fielder, or pitcher, look at um, cricket. Look at how the fast bowlers bowl. Um, and look how the spin bowlers bowl, the medium paces. There's different types of bowling. You've got spin, medium pace, and seam fast paced bowling. Um, there's not a lot of medium paces these days. They bowl around 60 to 75 mile an hour. A fast spinner will bowl at about 65 mile an hour. So a slow medium pacer is a fast spin bowler, really. Medium paces are generally all rounders. They're generally there to like give a break when they're bowling, give a break to the fast bowlers and the spin bowlers break up. Give them a bit of a rest. So they'll bowl a few overs just so that the captain can go right. We're resting one of our main strike bowlers for a bit in the outfield, give him a bit of a rest because he's bowled a lengthy spell of overs. Fast bowlers, they sometimes are very short spells and sometimes long spells. It all depends on new ball. versus an old ball. The weather conditions. The older the ball gets, you're more likely to throw the spinners in. Most fast bowlers are strike bowlers with the new ball. And watching like Jimmy Anderson with a new ball at his peak, or Gillespie or McGrath, two of the best Australian fast bowlers of all time. Oh, Brett Lee. Jesus Christ, Brett Lee. Brett Lee, one of the most, his average speed was terrifying. When you got Brett Lee bowling in anger at around 95 mile an hour average for 20 overs, and he bowled with just hate in his face. Dale Steyn of South Africa, um, injuries curtailed the end of his career, and again they're all to do with his action and the wear and tear. But Dale Steyn, one of the best fast bowlers of his era. Lasith Malinga, and you've got Sean Tate. So Lasith Malinga is Sri Lankan, and he's shorter. Sean Tate was a very tall Australian fast bowler, but he was less accurate. So when I say they're bowling like a baseball pitch with their arm out here, Lasith Malinga will duck his head, and his arm is out here, but he's so accurate. Sean Tate is taller, and so his arm is up here, and he also bowls like that, where most fast bowlers will bowl like that. They both can bowl high 90s, low hundreds. I think Sean Tate was once clocked at 104 mile an hour, and that was one of his accurate ones. Sean Tate could be very expensive for runs against. Lasith Malinga, possibly one of the best fast bowlers with a very unique action. They're the only two. They're called slingers in a way because their arm is out here. I wouldn't say their technique is a purely baseball side, but his arm is not like this. You want your bowling arm to be in this motion if you're a fast bowler. Spin bowlers, you spin like that. Fast bowler with his arm out here, you're going to be less accurate. You want your arm somewhere in this kind of angle, brushing your ear. You want your bowling arm to brush your ear like that, clip your ear, and bowl where you get your your bicep inside of your shoulder, your rotary cuff, just to clip your ear. I was always told you want your action just to clip your ear. If you're a spin bowler, you're rotating through your arm or through your wrists. So spin bowlers are much different, but fast bowlers, you generally you have your forearm like this to aim yourself, and then you bring your arm over like that. What Malinga did is he gets his arm like this, aims it, and then he ducks his head out the way, and he brings his arm like that. Sean Tate, being 6 foot, I think it was 6'6", he's releasing the ball from a much higher, even on the lean, a much higher release point than Malinga. Hello. Okay, that's all right. That's all right. About 45 minutes then. All right. I've got no milk, see, so you're gonna have to be supplying the milk. All right. Yeah. All right. Okay. Cravendale. Oh, Crave. Oh shit. You're making me think now. Well, I've got sugar, so just think of something. You know what I like. If you can't get that, get the basics, as his basic equivalent. You can't get that. If not, just think of something that you know I like golden nuggets or uh, gold or golden grahams if they still do them. I think they do. Not the cinnamon ones; they're horrible. I've had them; they're vile. But if you can, but if not, don't worry about it. Just think on your feet like frosties or something like that. All right, meet in a bit. Bye. Ah, that was me mum. She's doing a bit of shopping for me. She's dropping off a few bits. Sorry about that. Yeah, 104 mile an hour having to hit that. I think. I'm trying to think of some other very tall, fast bowlers. Stuart Broad for England is quite a tall bowler. You've got the Morkel brothers for South Africa. They're quite tall. They're in the high 6'7", 6'8" range. Mornay, Morkel, and Albie Morkel were quite tall. So when they're coming in, they're up here, and their release point is about. You think your forearm is about 2 to 3 foot. So if they're 6'8", their release point is 8'8". Bouncing that onto the pitch at around 90 to 98 mile an hour, and then bouncing up, that that is insane. And if you are a baseball pitcher or you follow baseball and you look at the mechanics behind the release point of a baseball pitcher or a release point of a quarterback, you're not pitching from height, you're pitching from width. So an NFL pitcher's pitching, again, arm like this from around his height. So depending on how tall your quarterback is your release point. And if you're releasing upwards or a straight pass, you're releasing from your side. So you're doing a lot of rotation through your body. A fastball is rotating up and down. And then you've got the side strain and then the weight on your landing foot, which will generally be your left foot if you're right-handed, and then your right foot goes in afterwards on the second stride, which is where a lot of force goes through your ankle and knee. So Jimmy Anderson's had a lot of side strains. Flintoff had ankle problems. Darren Goff, his knees, he's a very good fast bowler. He was short and powerful. He was very short and stocky with Darren Goff. And he generated a lot of his speed through his run up and his power in his core. Trying to think of some other fast bowlers. Kasparovich, former Australian bowler, is a similar build to Darren Goff. Jack Callis, good all rounder. Just a powerful man, big man, powerful man. RP Singh for India, again, just built like a brick shithouse. Not really overly thin and stringy, not overly short, just a powerful unit. Srisanth, he was found guilty of match fixing and gambling offences. He was quite a tall, rangy fast bowler. I'm trying to think of all the fast bowlers now. But Ambrose of the West Indies was quite tall. Darren Ambrose, he was quite a tall fast bowler. So you've got a different various like heights, but if you want to have a fast bowler coming in who can bounce the ball, you want someone over about 6'5". If you want a pure pace fast bowler, you're looking at a Brett Lee, a Darren Goff. They're shorter and they tend to generate a lot of their speed through their action and their run up. But spin bowlers, it's more to do with the wrist and your shoulder rotation and rotating your body because you're rotating with your fingers or wrist. So you've got wrist spin like that, or finger spin, which is these things where you put your thumb and your fingers and you spin the ball. So Shane Warne, for example, Muralitharan, Murali, Anil Kumble, he was a very fast spin bowler, could bowl at a faster speed, again with his action. So you've definitely Ashley Giles was a good spin bowler, and Phil Tufnell were good for England. Ashley Giles was a very, very competent all rounder. So there's definitely different styles for the different bowling. Paul Collingwood was a good all rounder. He was a medium pace bowler. His technique is a slightly slower pace of a fast bowler, so it's a similar technique, but he's generating slower speed, but he's dropping in with how he holds the seam of the ball, with how the ball rotates off the wicket. British Empire, Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, and Sri Lanka were all British colonies, and we took the sport over there, and they have the right climatic conditions to play. Plus, they actually have the willow trees required to make the bats, and they have a good woodworking industry. That's how that works. It's just to do with the British Empire. India gave us snooker, which is based off a game called Carrom board, which is a wooden board with sort of like ice hockey pucks on it, which you play by hand, and that became snooker and billiards and pool, which is what we see today. But carrom board is quite a fun Indian sport that I have played, and I do have 2 carrom boards in my grandparents' house. So basically, you have a square board with pockets like a snooker table, and it's made of varnished wood, and you can either have wood or plastic or it used to be ivory playing pucks, kind of, and you have a shooting puck, and then you have the coloured discs to knock into the pockets, and you have you can swing it with your hand or flick it with your finger, and basically it's how snooker sort of formed. It's sort of like checkers in a way as well with the shape, but it's interesting. Why not association football and rugby? That's an interesting one. The climatic conditions. parts of India and Pakistan and Bangladesh. Bangladesh is obviously it floods a lot. Um, Basically, it's the climatic conditions in India and Pakistan, especially the monsoon is basically the only time it rains. It's a very arid climate. Um, Therefore, a pitch would be very very dry. You wouldn't be able to get good purchase. There's deserts in India and Pakistan as well. Um, doesn't rain all year round. Something that you need for a football or rugby pitch is rain all year round. And for whatever reason, they got into cricket and also field hockey. That's what they're very good at. The two most popular sports are cricket and field hockey. Um, Also, those who went over, those colonial administrators, the soldiers who went over, a lot of them were from the middle class, and cricket's a middle class sport historically. So is field hockey. So therefore, the British administrators who went over, the British officers who went over in the Empire days, took their sports with them. Um, Whereas the other colonies, more working class people went over as colonial settlers, and they took rugby league, rugby union to a certain extent, and football, soccer with them. And then you had the other European immigrants to like Canada, Australia, and New Zealand who took rugby and football with them as well. Um, Generally, New Zealand had a lot of Scottish settlers and Welsh settlers, and they play rugby union, a lot of them, which they took with them from the middle classes. It's different. England's cricket is more the middle class sport, whereas rugby union, Wales and Scotland for the middle classes, it was more rugby union that was a dominant middle class sport. They took to New Zealand and Australia, and then the working class went over from the mining communities, and they took rugby league with them and football, or soccer. Canada is a different one because of the winters. The winters up there. Um, a lot of Scots went over to Canada, and that's how you get ice hockey. Lord Stanley was a Scottish lord. Um, his daughter actually was the reason why we had the Stanley Cup. Um, so Lord Stanley was Governor General of Canada at the end of the 1880s, 1890s. He was the Governor General that was put in place by the British government with the Dominion government in Canada. And his daughter was a massive fan of ice skating and ice hockey because they played it in Scotland. And that's the reason why we have the Stanley Cup. Quite literally, that's the reason why we have the Stanley Cup. Is his daughter basically, he loved the sport, but she actually played the sport and actually set up a women's team, and it went from there. I could go into the history of the Stanley Cup and how ice hockey became the national sport of Canada, but we could be here all day. There's a lot of things behind it to do with a lot of Scottish immigrants going over. Um, I'm also surprised. Rugby union is I think the second global sport. I think behind team sport behind football. Um, a lot of it is to do with the late turn to professionalism in the mid 90s. That's got something to do with it. The slow turn to professionalism. It has a smaller niche in fan base because it's more of a middle class sport. So the working classes weren't really overly interested for the most part, although some working class communities are rugby union communities, traditionally in England and France. Um, Rugby league as well. Again, for whatever reason, didn't really work in South Africa or Canada. If it had done it, it would be a different discussion we're having about position of rugby league internationally. It is it's getting there. I think the growth in the Americas, both North and South America, in the last decade is vital. I think to increase its global reach. Um, and with the corporate money of the US and Canada now behind Major League Rugby, I think it's going to grow massively in the US and Canada in the next decade. I have no doubt on that. The issues I think which is preventing rugby union and rugby league to that matter as well, reaching a far bigger global audience, although rugby union is far ahead with its World Cups being much better organised and more nations playing at a decent level, is money. The last World Rugby elections for who was going to be in charge of the game between Bill Beaumont, former England captain, and Augustine Pichot, former Argentina captain, a lot of their manifestos were money. And what we've seen is the collapse of Super Rugby, uh, to be reformed with the Trans-Tasman Australia New Zealand Super Rugby that we see now. So the collapse of the Super Rugby franchise system, um, and the issues behind that. Even before COVID, there was problems. Um, Spain have already been to Rugby Union World Cups in the 90s. A lot of their best players play in France. So Spain has got a good history in Rugby Union. Not in recent times, but in the 90s and the 80s, very good history. They have been at World Cups before. Romania's got a good funding matrix and a good professional league. So Romania have always been a solid European nation at the second tier level. The communist government under Ceausescu really put a lot of emphasis into facilities, and it was his favourite sport as well. Ceausescu, ironically, weird that. Um, um, Germany's got a good solid base. So has Belgium. And I've watched Germany and Belgium play in the last couple of years on the World Rugby YouTube page. Um, they've got a good solid foundation, but again, they are Belgian professional sports in a mess right now. The German professional sports are football and ice hockey. That are the team sports that are really well funded and supported, that have good TV deals, good fan base, good facilities. Rugby's playing catch up, but you've still got a lot of US and Canadian personnel um, living and working in Germany with the NATO side of things. Although that is winding down, that's why rugby is so popular in those countries is the NATO bases. And they came close to qualifying for the last World Cup. They got to the playoff repechage round, and they've got a good solid foundation of the Germans. But the COVID pandemic has derailed um, a lot of these teams' development and domestic leagues and growing the game domestically. It derailed a lot of development there. Um, Chile have a good chance against the US. The South American teams, Uruguay's led the way, other than Argentina. Of course, with COVID, that's affected the American Nations Championship, American Rugby Championship, which the US and Canada participate in. That's obviously been sort of put on hold because of COVID. Hopefully that starts up again. But for me, out of the Americas, after Argentina, Uruguay is the best nation, hands down. Hands down the best nation by a country mile. Chile is closing the gap. Canada's obviously on a downward spiral at the moment and is in a complete rebuild phase. And there's got to be questions asked about Canadian Rugby Union and the direction it's taking. The US, with Major League Rugby, I do think it could do better in growing itself across the whole of the US. On the West Coast, it's very popular, and parts of the East Coast, it's very popular. Universities now picking up on their university programs. They've got a draft in place now. It's grown really well in Atlanta, Georgia, and in New Orleans. They've grown it really well. It's going really well in Utah, Texas, Colorado, Seattle, and California. Um, it's growing. I do think, however, they could do better, but they're being very conservative in their growth. They don't want to overextend themselves like Major League Soccer did in the 90s and nearly lead to bankruptcy. So I think Major League Rugby are going about it the right way. They've learnt the mistakes from Major League Soccer in the 90s. They've done their homework. They're very, very cautious. I wouldn't say they're too negative. I think they're being a bit more slowly cautious about expansion and growing the game, building up um, a solid foundation with the foundation clubs that founded it and the new teams joining. They're being a little bit more cautious than Major League Soccer. Um, Uruguay, I think, will do well in the World Cup in 2 years' time. They're definitely the best of the teams from America, North or South, other than Argentina. They're far better than the US right now. Easily dominated Canada in their two-leg playoff. Dominated the US as well in their two-leg playoff. It's the second sport in Uruguay after football. So it's got a good following in Uruguay. And for a small nation to be that sporting successful, that accessible sporting wise, yeah, no, I do think they're going to do quite well. They could win at least one or two games at the World Cup, absolutely. They had a downward spiral between 2003 and 2015. They dipped. They missed out on qualification a few years, and they did drop in quality, and they've now shot up in the last 5 years. back to where they were in the 90s as the second team in South America after Argentina. And the more they develop and the more their best players play in Major League Rugby and play in Europe, they're going to eventually challenge Argentina. I have no doubt on that. In the Americas, Argentina obviously are where they are. They've got a bigger player base, better systems in place, but Uruguay are catching them up, and they are ahead of the US by a long way. They are far better than the US right now. COVID's had a lot to do with that, though. COVID, because a lot of the Uruguayan players play in the European leagues, whereas a lot of the Americans, Major League Rugby is now where they want to play. They want to be domestically based, and COVID really, I think, has benefited Uruguay with their players playing in the European leagues. They've got it started up sooner and have protocols put in place, and therefore they're playing at a higher level. They are, and they've got some brilliant players as well. Do I think Chelsea are overrated? I think it's a very competitive league title this season, and West Ham being in the mix in the European places really throws things up in the air as well. They're having a very good season. I think some other sides are on a downward spiral. Leicester had a slow start, although they're picking it up, and they're going to challenge again for the European places come the end of the season. They've hit a vein of form, so it's a very interesting European and title race this season. I think it's going to be close this season. Major League Rugby though doesn't play at the same time of year as the NFL does. What Major League Rugby's got to compete against is the MLS and Major League Baseball. With Major League Baseball having its shutdown, um, you know, it's lockout. That's going to only benefit Major League Soccer and Major League Rugby, and they've got to be mindful that Major League Soccer had its wobbles in the first decade of its existence, and basically was facing bankruptcy, had no money, and relied upon David Beckham and then the other European players making their entrance in the early 2000s to save the league, basically. Major League Rugby, I think, has learned from that. They're being a bit more cautious in the stadiums they play in. Slower growth. I think they're very mindful of the mistakes Major League Soccer made by having massive stadiums, like 60 to 70,000 seat stadiums that had about 4,000 fans in, really crap for TV. Major League Rugby, smaller stadiums, choosing markets where they already are playing. They're playing at the amateur and social level. So Utah, Colorado, Texas, California, Seattle, and parts of the East Coast have been very, very selective in where they've gone. For a reason. They've been very smart in selecting where they play their games, where their teams are based. Very, 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 very smart in their selection of locations. I would like to see a team in Vancouver, though. That would be very nice because that's where a lot of the Canadian internationals have played in Vancouver. So that'd be nice to see them get a team there. Would be good. But yes, the NFL. We'll wait and see what happens with the NFL. You know, will they ever have a team in London? I think that window's passed. Why would you take a struggling Jaguars franchise that doesn't draw at home anyway and plant them in London? They are a basket case of a team. They're the most likely if there was to be a relocation to London to plonk a team. But would the British fan base really tolerate a failure in the US come over here to fail in the UK? I don't know how that's going to play out and how that will look. Personally, it's a personal opinion on that one. In regards to, I don't know if they play the same time. No, Major League Rugby play in the same time slot as Major League Soccer and Major League Baseball. They're the leagues they're competing against. You could not play in let's say Minnesota in the middle of winter. The weather is too bad. Look at Colorado, and they try to winter. The first season they played the first games in January, and they got a lot of snow, so they were a bit smarter in putting the season in the summer months and the spring and the early autumn or fall, as you would call it, just for playing conditions. Yeah, well, I think rugby league would be a better sport to grow in the US and Canada than rugby union, personally, just because of the style of play and the ball in play more and less whistles and less stoppages. But rugby union's got a foothold now, and this is the problem with rugby league. They're always playing catch up, always playing catch up. But no, it is growing at college level. It's very popular on the West Coast in California and Seattle. It's very, very popular in the Southeast, and it's very popular in the Rocky Mountain states. So it's already got some really good footholds in some locations. And Glendale, Colorado, is the home of US Rugby, and Texas. They will support anything in Texas. Texas is a sports mad state. They support anything in Texas. There's several teams already in Texas. New Orleans has bought into it. They've got a team with some great kits, by the way. The New Orleans, the Nola Gold, the New Orleans, New Orleans, Louisiana Gold, the Nola Gold. They are. I love their kit. I would love to get my hands on one of their kits. It's a beautiful jersey. It's a beautiful kit they have. Absolutely stunning design of kit. I really like their crest. I really like their kit, and I would like to see them do well as well. Uh, they play a style of rugby that I like. It's just go mad. But yes, the NFL and CFL, I think, are taking the threat of both kinds of rugby seriously because they've got this international player pathway program. Christian Wade, as an example, they've had Jared Hayne, Valentine Holmes. They've had some rugby players, Jordan Malitia, going to the Philadelphia Eagles and being drafted and actually playing for them. They are taking the threat of rugby to them quite seriously. And it's a faster paced sport as well. The ball is in play more, and it's less stoppages, which is interesting. So that's something to bear in mind quite significantly. And universities in the US and Canada are picking it up. So there is a draft system now, there's a collegiate system now, university programs. So it's growing. It is growing, and the quality level is improving every year. The women's game is very popular as well. So there's definitely an interest there. It's never going to be on the same level as the NFL or the NHL, the NBA, or even Major League Soccer, I don't think. But it's definitely got a good foundation, and I think it can grow and become a much better sport in the US and Canada. Absolutely. And with baseball having its lockout, you could attract fans. And a lot of baseball fans are very frustrated and angry right now, and are turning their backs on Major League Baseball. And you look at social media and the reaction, and it's not a positive reaction. Do I think NFL players? Some NFL players have made the switch back. So there's a lot of the US and Canadian players have played CFL, NFL, or played at collegiate level, and have made the switch. Um, and that is a known fact. A lot of them have. I think they could, especially the running backs could definitely do it. Maybe not a Mahomes or a Jackson, maybe not a quarterback necessarily, but the punting, some of the punters could definitely switch into a fullback winger role because of their build and their kicking ability, and definitely some of the wide receivers and running backs could absolutely slot into a back line, no problem. Um, some of the tight ends and line guards and right tackle, left tackle, all that kind of thing, because of their build and their size, they would struggle to play 80 minutes. They would struggle to play 20 minutes. They would be blowing a gasket very, very quickly. They would have to do a lot of gym work and technique work, and it's very difficult to basically train a front row from scratch in your mid 20s. But definitely the wide receivers and running backs and the punters could and goal kickers could definitely. Some of them have actually played rugby. Could definitely learn to slot into a back line. Um, some could also be loose forwards as well, but again, it's the forward technique, the scrummaging technique. It's very, very difficult. Um, Christian Wade has proved that you can switch from rugby to NFL. Jared Hayne experiment, obviously, Jared Hayne, look at his legal troubles. He's in prison now, but Valentine Holmes as well. Um, they're kick receivers, running backs, wide receiver. There's definitely certain positions you could just go right. You take the pads off. You've got the right build and the pace, and especially the defensive special teams when you're the defending team and you've got those One's line deep field for kick return and an intercept return. Um, you could definitely convert them to rugby players, be it league or union. Uh, the forward side of things, rugby league is easier to convert players than union. Rugby union scrum, you've got two props, a hooker, the second row. That's a technique that you learn from a very young age, from youth level at under 11s to when you start scrummaging contested scrums at about 11, 12 years old. It's very, very difficult to suddenly convert. It has been done, but it's very difficult to go to someone who's 18, 19 to 25 to go, right, you've got the build to be a front row or second row forward. Let's convert you to that because there's um, so much technique you have to learn to do it safely, and not only do it safely, but do it properly and competitively, where you're not getting shunted backwards, and then you've got to work out on your core and the amount of miles you will run in a game. Um, that's a very difficult switch to make if you are a right tackle or a left tackle or a tight end. That's a pain. Which league has the best athletes? I'm going to say the NHL. Ice hockey. You've got to be able to skate, um, puck control, stick control. Um, I would say ice hockey. You've got to be the best athletes, um, because they're 20% smaller than an NFL or rugby player, but they hit 40% harder. Yeah, and you're hitting at 40 mile an hour if you're skating full pelt and you're colliding. That's a car accident. That would be my personal opinion. Having got mates who played, watched it for 29 years now, watching ice hockey. I think, yeah, ice hockey players have got to be the best athletes overall. Followed very shortly behind AFL, Aussie rules, for the athletic ability you've got to have. I would say rugby league and rugby union as well are very close behind, for all round ability, because NFL, you've got your positions, you've got your quarterback, you've got your kick return, you've got your punters, your punting unit, you've got your defensive unit. You're very shoehorned into your position. Whereas in rugby union, you've got to be able to ruck and maul even if you're a back. Some backs will help out in the scrum if they're a man down, as a flanker or a number eight, to help out. So you've got to be a bit more universal in your positioning. Rugby league, again, you can see forwards in the back line sometimes, and backs in the scrum, helping out as emergency forwards, interchange forwards. Ice hockey, however, no, I think you've got to have so much balance, speed, physicality. You've then got a stick in your hands, and you've got to have puck control. So you've got to have hand-eye coordination, good balance. You've got to be able to skate, um, and then dish out hits and fight. I mean, I think, um, yeah, Lafreniere, Byfield, Stutzler, and Raymond, I would have taken first overall with his season he's had so far. Lafreniere, um, took a slow boil, but he's picking it up and he's playing in a very good side, so he doesn't have to have all the pressure on him as a first overall pick. Byfield and Stutzler's playing on a poor team. Let's be honest with the Senators. Byfield, he's had his ups and downs. I think Lafreniere, with the team he's playing on, he doesn't have as much pressure on him because he's already got an established side that are playing quite well. Raymond's having a breakout season with Detroit. I think Raymond and Lafreniere would still be the top two. Byfield, Stutzler, he's playing on a poor team, a very young, inexperienced team. Byfield, I think he went a bit higher than he should have. But it's with the disruptive couple of seasons we've had, the lack of game time they've had in the minors and the junior leagues after drafting as well. It's going to impact their development as younger players in a league, when you take that step up a level. With the fact that the AHL and the ECHL have had disrupted seasons as well, where you would normally develop these players if you want to give them extra game time, development time in the minors, um, having disruption. Um, it's a hard one to gauge, but I think Raymond and Lafreniere would be my top two. If these are the top four, I would say Stutzler would still be in the top four. Byfield, I think, would have dropped out. In my opinion, would have dropped out if we're doing the draft now. He wouldn't be in the top four. I think he wouldn't even be in the top 10. Personally, I think Raymond and Lafreniere are a step ahead. They've taken to the NHL. Lafreniere took a bit of time, and there was a lot of question marks. Was he quite ready? He's settled in quite well. Stutzler's playing on a poor side. Um, Best three athletes of all time. That's an interesting one. Um, I wouldn't say Maradona was the best. Skill wise, yeah, but training, fitness, uh, drug and alcohol problems, no, I wouldn't have him there. Brady, how he's still going as a quarterback in his early 40s is ridiculous. Um, but they have changed the rules about protecting the quarterbacks. If he was playing in the 80s, he wouldn't have played as long as he had because he would have been smashed a lot more. Um, Plus, the team they built around him as well helps. But they changed the rules on protecting the quarterbacks from late hits. If he was playing in the 90s and the 80s and 90s, I think he would have retired long before. You know, he's hit this period of 20 odd seasons. I think he would have lasted about 10 seasons at most. So I think the era he's playing in has helped him, and the team he played on helped him. But he's out at Tampa Bay, and they're quite a good side as well. So the teams he's played on have always been competitively very, very good. But he's playing in an era where there's more protection for the quarterback now. If he was drafted 20 years earlier, his career would have been shorter. I have no doubt on that. Michael Jordan, yeah, again, basketball is a completely different sport than other sports. You know, um, but yeah, Michael Jordan, I would say, Magic Johnson as well. Got to remember Magic Johnson in there, and you've got other players as well. Who Kobe Bryant, you know, in the basketball arena. That's a difficult one because there's some really good players that play throughout all the eras of basketball. I think he's the most well known because of the time he played. Um, but that's a difficult one. I would say the sports they play, they're definitely, you could argue Maradona is a difficult one with his off-field issues and some of his training issues and health issues. Skill wise, yes, you could argue possibly better than Pele. For me, Pele, I think, is still the best football player of all time. Just putting it out there. Um, because not only did he do it domestically in Brazil, he also did it at international level with Brazil as well. Um, and he was a one club guy for the most of his career, apart from his appearances in the US later on with the Cosmos. Um, Maradona, I think there was too much off field drama with Maradona. Michael Jordan, he's iconic for what he brings to the table. People know who Michael Jordan is now. I mean, he owns his own NASCAR team now, so he's still involved in sport now. He owns the Memphis Grizzlies and he owns a NASCAR team. So even though he's no longer a sports athlete, he's still involved in sports ownership. So he's still actively involved. That's where the difference is between Jordan and the other two. Brady's still playing, whether he post retirement gets into coaching or team ownership, that's another thing. But Michael Jordan, I think, stands out from the three in the fact that he's still actively involved in sports ownership now, and you know he owns a NASCAR team. He owns an NBA franchise, or he's part owner of an NBA franchise. So in that regard, he's still actively involved post retirement. Brady's still playing. And there's going to be a quarterback out there who will try and challenge him for his GOAT status. And Brady's a very divisive quarterback. There are other quarterbacks that are more well beloved, so to speak. Um, so Brady's still technically playing. Therefore, to say he's the greatest of all time right now in Super Bowl appearances, yes, as a player, there's going to be a player out there who eventually will top that at some point or challenge him at some point. Not in the near future, but at some point in our lifetime, there will be another Tom Brady-esque dominant quarterback who is dominant for 2 decades. It could happen. With Michael Jordan, I think he's because Maradona is no longer alive, and of course, the end of his career was a disaster. His off-field issues was a disaster. Um, his antics and bits and pieces post retiring playing days. His coaching career was a disaster. That damages his reputation for what he did in the sport, plus his drug issues as well, getting drug bans in there. I don't think you can have him as the best of all time. There's too much negativity and controversy, whereas Pele doesn't have the controversy that Maradona has, so to speak. Hello? Oh, I'll see you in about 10 minutes. Okay, bye. Right, so I'm not going to be able to stay on much longer because my mum's coming over. You've got to have mum over for Christmas, because this will be the last time I see my mum until next year. So I'm going to make the most of having my mum over for half hour for a cup of tea and a chat. So, but yes, if you, in regards to Michael Jordan, I would say for his impact on not only the NBA but wider with his appearance in Space Jam and his involvement with sport post retiring, where he owns two sports teams and he's still actively involved in sport and giving back. I would say out of those three, he's the best. He's less divisive than Tom Brady and less controversy than Maradona. And Jordan had a fair bit of controversy in Olympic selection and his playing days. Still far less controversial than Diego Maradona and Tom Brady with some of the antics of the Patriots when he was there with Spygate, Deflategate, and other bits and pieces. It does again damage his reputation as well to a certain extent. However, I think he's the most consistent quarterback over the last 2 decades. There's no doubt on that. Better than both Manning brothers and Roethlisberger and Drew Brees. And they had their fair bit share of controversy off the field as well. I think the Mannings as a pair of brothers are exemplary sportsmen. I will say that both Manning, Eli, and Peyton are exemplary on and off the field. Brady, however, far more consistent than both Manning brothers, and therefore for consistency and his ability to defy the aging process, which I find ridiculous, how he's still going at his age. But again, as I say, the rules have changed in regards to protecting the quarterback. If he was playing 20 years earlier, his career is shorter, and we're not having a discussion. And it would be Mahomes or if Kaepernick had kicked on or RG3 had kicked on, if Michael Vick hadn't decided to get involved in a dogfighting ring, for example, and avoided all his off-field dramas, we could be looking at a completely different conversation. The organisation he played for, the consistency of that organisation over a 20-year period, going to another team that had a very solid roster and slotting straight in again, in itself, the team that was around him has helped him. But I think there's some other top athletes in there. I would have Pele in there. I would have Michael Schumacher as a motorsport racing driver. I would have Joost van der Westhuizen and Jonah Lomu, rugby union, in the conversation. Wayne Gretzky, how's he missed out from the conversation? Marc Messier, Patrick Roy, Mario Lemieux. Bear in mind, Mario Lemieux fought with cancer and a debilitating heart and back injuries, and his points per game is actually higher than Gretzky's. So I imagine if Mario Lemieux did not have his health issues, Gretzky's record, Jaromir Jagr, I think, if you're an ice hockey fan. And I've got a Jagr signed jersey in which I might wear over on New Year's for the New Year's Day live stream I'll do. So for me, it depends. Like, Mal Meninga in rugby league, Martin Afire in rugby league, Martin Chariots of Fire, brilliant player he was, but he did play on a very good dominant Wigan side. So that does temper things a little bit. Dan Carter and Johnny Wilkinson in rugby union. Brian Habana on the wing, Doug Howlett. I mean, we're talking superstar players in their respective sports. There are, so I think there's a fair few you could say could make the top three. But if you're looking at, it's subjective, isn't it? It's a subjective list. So in that regard, it's subjective to the person's list who it is. It's all subjective. So you know that makes it a bit more difficult to say, "Oh, this is the best of all time," in my opinion. You know, there's going to be someone who disagrees with that opinion. I would still have Michael Jordan in the mix as in the top 10 or top 20 athletes of all time. Tom Brady is yet. I would always look at those who've retired. I wouldn't look at Tom Brady because he's still an active player in his respective sport. Um, if I was to do a top 10 or top 20 list, it would have to be of retired players, not current players. So if I were doing a top 10 list in football, it's all retired players. I'm doing a top 10 list in rugby league, retired players. Rugby union, retired players. Ice hockey, retired players. I would never put a current player into the top 10 of all time because something could happen, which some kind of scandal, which we saw with Maradona, which then you go, now Lance Armstrong in cycling, before he admitted to his doping, he's the greatest of all time. No, he's not. So I always look at retired athletes when I rank them in their respective sports and all time, and therefore that list changes every year because new athletes retire, and then you can look back at their career, and then you look at the off-field dramas they have, and go, well, that for me changes my opinion. They've got to be good on and off the field. They've got to be respectful off the field and humble, and on the field they've got to be good at what they do. So that's why I like Matt Letizia is one of the most underrated English football players of all time, one of the best players of all time. Only got I think 8 caps for England because he was playing for Southampton. So you've got to bear that in mind. Matt Letizia always makes my fantasy starting footballing 11, be it for England or world. He always gets into my squad, as I would call it. I would always have Matt Letizia in my midfield. Um, I would always have a player like Hernan Crespo and Batistuta as a striking partnership. I would always have Figo in my midfield. Um, Goalkeeper is a bit more interesting. Buffon's still technically playing. I'm more leaning towards, Tafarel of Brazil as my starting goalkeeper over Fabian Barthez, for example. It's all subjective. I always look at, when I do those kind of lists, retired athletes, never current athletes, because something could happen where there's a massive scandal in their career, which then changes everything. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. I've got to go now. Thank you very, very much for all your questions. I've really appreciated it. And I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon.